ICB, from Paula Bennett from VCSA, Dawn Harvey, our Chief People Officer, Catherine Howe, the new Chief Executive of Dorset, but Sam Crowe is here. And we have apologies from Paul Johnson and Andrew Rosser. Are there any other apologies that we're aware of? Okay, thank you.
I think we would have had enough chairs if everybody
we would have had trouble. Of course, Patricia, given your news, and we'll probably say a couple of words at the end, but you know, you have everyone's goodwill for the meeting, and I'll leave it to you to say something at the end if that suits you. Any declarations of interest not on the schedule that anybody wants to declare as additional? Thank you very much. We have the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of July, which Kay very ably chaired. She set the bar very high. And is everyone happy with them as a reflection of the meeting? On the action log, it's recommended that all items are closed and we're given an update on them. Is everyone happy with that, or is there anything that anybody wanted to ask a question on? Can I take those as noted? Thanks very much indeed. So we moved to the patient story. David, I think you're going to introduce Karen, who is online, and say something in a sec, but you're going to introduce Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few words really, because it's better that we spend time hearing from colleagues, from Karen and colleagues in the employment sector, but just to sort of re-emphasise and reconnect, I suppose, that one of our key priorities over the last 3 years, and something we want to take forward into the new ICB and new ways of working, has been our commitment to embracing and growing the amazing value that our voluntary organisations, our voluntary sector and our volunteers bring to our communities, local people, and obviously in the way they connect with our services, enhancing and making sure that we can run the services in the best way possible. I believe that Karen is going to be here. I can't see her at the moment.
Karen online.
She's going to say a few words, and then we've got a short video from volunteers, and then hopefully that'll take us into a good discussion about this really important sector.
Karen, I can't see you. Are you there by any chance, just in case you've used a different login? So I think we'll go to the video, please.
We support anybody who over 18 who is having cancer, has had cancer. We support them, we befriend them. We also provide therapies. There's 23 of us in the Bournemouth Centre. Between us all, we give about 4,300 hours a year. And then within the centre, there's about 3,700 sessions of counselling and therapy every year, with about 1,000 activity sessions, which includes walks, sound gong, yoga, arts and crafts, book club. It's like a haven to go, you know, when you're in trouble, really.
I retired early, and at that point, of course, I had 3 choices: either to find another job, stay at home, watch television, or take a new career of volunteering. I enjoy doing it with loads of money, obviously. 23 years is a long time. It seems to me that volunteering is in my DNA, something I've always done since I gave up work all that long ago. When Lindsay asked me why do I do it, I didn't know why I did it, I just did it. I benefit mentally and physically because it keeps me active. So really, it's a win-win.
If individuals know that there's other individuals that really care about them, that makes a huge impact. It's the long-term moments that see women that you knew at the beginning, seeing their journeys. It's very rare that somebody changes overnight, but just the consistency of time, seeing women through the sessions. We've got lots of different sessions, building confidence, sessions about friendship, just meeting there every week, meeting other women in the similar situations, just seeing them develop their own confidence and their own self-worth. I just find that really inspiring, yeah.
Like, I never thought I'd ever have a job. Like, I'd basically given up. But Spear provided me an opportunity. I'll always be so grateful for that. The opportunity they gave me to come out of such a dark place and provide me an opportunity to have a future, a job. It's something I want all young people to be able to feel and know that they have a future too. They show you like how to find that confidence within yourself. They showed me that I was so much more capable than I ever thought. It does show how much I've grown, and it does show that what I'm capable of.
It's just lovely to do something for nothing for someone who needs the help. We're not here when the children come in, but the pictures and the videos of them enjoying it and hearing the stories of how much they've enjoyed it all is really inspiring.
Thank you very much. I think that Karen isn't joining us. We've tried to make contact. Zoe, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words to compliment the video.
Well, obviously that was all about Can and what they were actually doing as a project, basically. So no, it was just I think she'd want to sort of say that out of all the wide variety of things that they do, and obviously backed up then with us at the BCSA, and that was really, I think, what it was all about, to get the real life stories rather than just stats.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been trying to do for a long time. It's just and like all of you, when you make the presentation, the real story.
Thanks very much, and we value, enormously the work that takes place in the community sector. Any thoughts from anyone that you'd like to share or pass back, Siobhan?
No, it makes me reflect just on how important the voluntary sector is and will continue to be going forward. And I managed to get to their annual sort of report and their annual members meeting. Not this, there's one coming up, but the last one. And actually, I was just struck by the diversity in the room. And actually, the reality was I didn't know about it all, and I don't. And I know we can't all know about everything, but as we move towards place and place leadership and place work, I think it gives us a real opportunity to be probably much more connected than. And I think we're reasonably connected, but we can do even more. Yeah. And I just think that video just sparked that in me, that as we look forward to sort of how we're going to really galvanise place and neighbourhood, the voluntary sector is going to absolutely be.
Yeah, it struck me when I moved to Dorset how strong the voluntary and the community sectors are. Yeah. Actually, it's something we must really examine.
So it was really, obviously we absolutely understand the sort of the social aspect, particularly for people as they hit retirement. I was really pleased to see the younger person reflected in there as well, because actually, particularly, post-COVID, the kind of loss of confidence in the generation, really, in terms of interaction. So the intergenerational aspect, I think, was really, really positive. And I think it fits as well, doesn't it, with the getting folks back to work initiative that the government is really driving. So I think it was that bit that really hit home for me, and I was glad to see it now.
Thanks very much. Louise, online, you've got your hand up.
Thanks, Rob. Just that video is really powerful, isn't it? It really gets it across the sense of why people volunteer and what they get out of it. And I know that, at Healthwatch, we've got just over 70 volunteers, and they're a really crucial part of our work. We wouldn't be able to do our work without them because we're such a small team. But actually, to build on that comment about young people. So over the last years, young volunteers are the group that we've seen the most increase in. We've done a project with some young people at a school. We've got more young people sort of under the age of 25 volunteering with us on a number of different projects, actually. So yeah, I think there's real capacity out there if we tap into it. But the way to do that is you need really skilled, experienced, supportive volunteer officers who can support that work and make sure that volunteers are being looked after, given the right training and support to be able to do their job. So that would be my plea, just to remember that this isn't a totally free resource, although you know it really does save a lot of money. But volunteers do need investing in. We have to think about their well-being and what they're getting out of the process as well, and supporting them along the way. Thanks.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for those comments. Yes.
Similarly, I was also looking out for the young people, but it's just a general question around, is it feeling inclusive enough for volunteers to come forward really to, I suppose, reflect the cultural diversity across Dorset? Because I would say I was struck by potentially a lack of diversity, but that obviously is just a snapshot. I just wondered in terms of.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
Yeah, no, go on, please. So.
Yeah, a lot of work has been actually done with that, especially within specific groups, and it's a difficult one because some of them don't feel the trust in different outside their cultural environments, that sort of thing. So it's breaking down those barriers, but it's actually getting, as I say, with staff and everything, and sort of, you know, I mean, I retired from assistant vice in March, but it was interesting looking at the cultural differences and across the board of what we were getting from paid staff, and then that brought the volunteers in as well. And I totally agree about the support, because I think that is key, that they feel comfortable within their own environments. The other thing that I'd also like to say on the young people side is people volunteer for different reasons. And obviously that gentleman was saying about retiring, but the younger people and doing a lot of work with the unis, with the colleges, and then actually supporting those young people to be able to get jobs or start their own small businesses or whatever they want to do. But it is a two-way street. And I just think the young people, also there's a number of people now that are managing to get sort of 20, 25-year-olds on their boards, and I think that's important from a strategic level, because you know they otherwise, if you look at a lot of boards as well, you know those aren't diverse enough, and also the age ranges. It's good to have people with experience. However, we still need all the new everything that's going on for their generation and their careers. We need to make sure that that's embedded as soon as we can. And then that will, again, if you get the younger people on board, then it's just a number of things, obviously for their career and everything else. But what it also does is bring just fresh blood in, and those are the future. So I think we need to look at that.
We've got Patricia and then Matthew.
So thanks for that video, David. It was great. It actually made me think about a few things in that young volunteering is really important. It creates a sense of citizenship for young people, which I think we've lost a little bit over the last few years. And our NHS providers have really, really good young volunteer programmes that take people in from 16 to 25. And that's not just about creating that feeling of citizenship, but also it opens up their eyes to a much broader spectrum of careers that they might want to think about in health and care and local government, which is invaluable, because one of our issues, as we know, is if we don't get on top of bringing more, keeping more young people in Dorset over the next 10 years, then the number of over 85s that need support and care will completely outnumber people of working age in Dorset. So this is a really important aspect of getting on top of that. I think when we think about the diversity of volunteering, what we have to really remember is that a lot of people that have come to this country, particularly from global majority areas, feel quite strongly about collectivism. That's part of their culture. So, that fits really well with volunteering. But they also believe in multi-generational living and multi-generational support. So quite often a carer is to extended family, because that's an important aspect of family life as opposed to relying on the social care system. So we need to think very carefully about how we create a space and capacity for those people to join the third sector, because I'm sure that, you know, there are certainly aspects in my community where that would be really welcome, but it's finding the time when you're already looking after extended family, because that's part of your cultural identity.
Thank you very much. Matthew.
Thank you. Well, what a great way to begin the meeting today, celebrating the work of our amazing volunteers across Dorset. And I think when we look at health and care, they do so much, and we need to have very much in mind that there's a very strong relationship between strong, flourishing communities and good health outcomes, and volunteering is at the heart of that. I think it may be worth, as an ICB, thinking about the different points of contact, and I think we've got three, for example, which are the volunteering that we do with people as part of our delivery. So as Patricia has said, for example, the FTs will have really strong arrangements for volunteers, and part of that is encouraging young people to come in and learning from young people's eyes. So we've got a 15-step challenge where we bring young people into the environment and get their view about what a healthcare environment feels like. We've also then got our relationship with volunteers in a slightly different way, which is the volunteer sector that works actively in health. And so the hospice movement represented was a good example of that. And then we've got the third area, which I think is that much bigger and diverse area, where we've got volunteers in communities across the area we serve. And they, as Siobhan has said, they are vital and going to become increasingly important in terms of how we're changing the healthcare system and the move towards neighbourhoods and that sort of partnership with citizens around preventative health. So the 2 points I'd make in conclusion are, in addition to the immense value and sort of gratitude that we should offer to volunteers, we do a huge amount of learning from the eyes and ears of volunteers that's really important for how we improve care. But secondly, what I hear back from organisations which bring together volunteers is we could do a lot better in terms of how we shape our relationships with those organisations, how we pay attention to them as partners, and on occasion the contractual frameworks we have. So the message back is people need longer term contracts so that they can do the work to help to bring together volunteers for those organisations that work in that way.
Thanks, really helpful comments. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Yes, Forbes.
It's a perennial conversation, isn't it? It's about how do we best use sort of informal services, of which volunteers are one. They're hugely valuable, and the video was great, and there are many examples of great work across Dorset. And in the spirit of left shift neighbourhood working, absolutely support the comments that have been made. It's how we better do it, move it to that next stage. Because if we're honest, we've had these conversations repeatedly, really, and I think we have moved things on, but actually we've got to do it better. And it's just how, as a collective, we make that happen. I think the comment about we've got to remember the volunteers are there to offer support, but the volunteers need support themselves. And we've got to look at how we better do that at a neighbourhood level. And then the secondary issues, when you get into a contractual sense, absolutely this well, that any funding is non-recurrent. We can, you know, like if there is any funding whatsoever to support it, that we've somehow got to, you know, they'd be better than.
Thanks very much. So thank you, David, and please thank Karen for the video. And we reflected it was really interesting that young people were part of that. We've had this discussion about the points of contact, the good programs that the providers are doing on 16 to 25. And then I've got a comment and a question. I suppose my comment is 25 a bit arbitrary? People can still be young and have mental health problems and want something to do in a post-COVID world and helping people into employment and to get their confidence back. Maybe 25 is a bit young now. And just any thoughts on that? But then really, David, when we do start thinking about strategic commissioning capability, how do we build into contracts the things that we expect to see and welcome, to answer Forbes' point that we don't want this to be a perennial discussion where we talk about it. The voluntary sector at times can feel that statutory organisations turn the taps off very easily when there's a funding problem. Funding can be once off in nature. Well, so your thoughts, David, on us sort of really starting to address that properly as we become an organisation charged with leftward shift and transformation.
It's easy, Rob. This is interesting. So I had the conversation at the AGM yesterday with the men's shed Wareham gentleman who was kind of saying there's more we could do if we just had a little bit more money. And they run off a budget of £2,500 a year. And they do so much work. It's incredible how much you can achieve for so little. We've got a paper in part 2 which is about how we get into the mode of developing and delivering strategic outcomes-based commissioning. It's a draft paper, so it's just a discussion. But the thrust of that and the opportunity we've got within that is letting long-term contracts with secure budgets where we can stipulate the involvement and the requirement to involve the third sector and the sharing of that investment in that out-of-hospital neighbourhood health type approach. And that then brings in stability for those voluntary organisations to have a stream of funding that's more secure. And I think that's the way into it. So we need to fundamentally shift our model because Forbes is right. We keep coming back to it because we intend to do it. It's very difficult within the architecture that we've got at the moment, where we let our contracts effectively on an annual basis. And to steal your quote of yesterday, Rob, where we're trying to land our budget on a jumbo jet on a postage stamp on the 31st of March before we reset from the 1st of April. It's very difficult to promise and support the third sector to thrive when we're kind of doing an annual reset of budgets like that. So our opportunity, and that's in all of us do, through the outcomes-based commissioning approach, to build in longer term budgets, which then allows us to share that investment across the voluntary sector over a longer period of time, which gives them stability and space to grow.
Thank you. Dan and then Nick.
Kind of just an observation, and I'm not sure how helpful it will be. But I agree. I was thinking perennial conversation, which kind of was the phrase that Forbes used. And then I feel like over a while, and I suspect kind of pre-ICB, we sort of end up in a conversation about contractual certainty to enable organisations to do what they want to do. And I can't see that going away. And then the culture is the NHS or parts of the NHS contract with another organisation to supply volunteers to contribute to the service. That made me think about policing specials, where there are volunteer police officers, but who the organisation contracts with individually, rather than through a funded organisation. I don't know, I've answered to any of that, but it's just an interesting thought about how do you contract with volunteers in a world where contractual long-term certainty is definitely nearly impossible in the short term. And how do other parts of the public sector do it?
Promote.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Nick.
Just on the 25 limit.
Yeah, thank you.
I think Sam might correct me, but if I'm wrong, but I think 25 is the limit from a local authority point of view, where looked after children essentially aren't looked after from the care leaving out the transitions. So whether that's related to this, but
yeah, I guess when we look at demography, if there are people over 25, we might want to think about doing something. If not that, I just read a lot in the media, and I don't know whether it's relevant to Dorset or not. We'll to look at the demography, that there's a lot of people over 25 who are, we want to be economically active as a society, and they need something to help build their confidence a bit. But maybe we'll look at a different way of doing that. And the only thing that strikes me, David, from what you said is, I suppose as we think about strategic commissioning, we think about market making as well. So something like a Londoner, when demography changes, typically you invest in umbrella organisations that help new businesses to get going from the voluntary and the community sector to meet some of those demographic needs. And so we might want to think about how organisations help spin-offs and organisations to flourish. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just come back on David's point about strategic commissioning, conversation about how we might look at this through contracts. I've just put a slightly different take on this. The Health and Wellbeing Board in September is going to have our paper on thriving communities, which was a Dorset Council approach where we wanted to understand how to invest non-recurrent money in strengthening the voluntary sector. So we very much looked at an infrastructure organisation to build capability and capacity of the sector. And actually, in some of the conversations we've been having through the Dorset Council Community Partnerships programme with the sector, some of the needs that are coming forward are much more a partnership that looks at our expertise in training, development, capacity building, not just the money. But there's something about using the asset of the public sector to provide support in a much more rounded way, rather than just viewing this through a narrow lens of contracts and what's the opportunity through commissioning. So just put that on the table.
Thank you. Okay. Really helpful comments to think about down the line. Anyone else? That's a good discussion, and thanks again for arranging the video. We come on to item 3, and then we'll move to Patricia's report. You'll know that in terms of my update, from the 1st of September, I'm now remaining chair of Dorset, but now also chair of Somerset and BSW. We are in the process of appointing a cluster chief executive. That will be announced shortly, I hope, and then the process of consultation as we begin to think about the organisation for the cluster. When I was appointed chair, I became chair of all 3 ICBs, which meant that the other 2 chairs' terms ended. Paul van der Heide at Somerset has now joined the board as a NEM of Somerset after stepping down as chair and become the deputy chair of Somerset. And given my bandwidth and the time that I have to spend on trying to help create the new cluster, we'll probably have an asynchronous arrangement where I chair Dorset and I chair BSW, and if I can't make a meeting, Kay would chair Dorset or Julian would chair BSW. But for Somerset, my intention is that Paul will chair meetings and I'll attend. And so we'll take advantage of the fact that we've got a former ICB chair still operating on the board, and Paul will be the deputy chair of the cluster as well. When the chief executive is appointed, they become accountable officer for all 3 ICBs in the way that I'm chair of all 3 ICBs, and obviously we will deal with the transition of that as needed around when we can make an appointment and when those arrangements are best put in place. The early focus for thinking about consultation and staffing resources will obviously be the question, David, that you mentioned earlier: what is good strategic commissioning, and what will the ICB's role be in ensuring a better level of understanding of our community and the levers that we can pull through contracts, and indeed identifying outcomes for capitated budgets when we have IHOs, integrated health organisations in our region as well. And after setting up the organisation, that will be the first priority, to think about how do we make sure we're equipped to do that. In the meantime, as we'll discuss later in part 2, all 3 ICBs have issues to deal with in order to meet this year's operating plan and budget. And so the boon of still having 3 boards in place while we set up the cluster, and each board focusing on its delivery issues and meeting its operating budget is really important. And so during the course of today, although we have an eye on the future, it's really important that we focus on, are we going to meet our operating plan? Are we going to balance the budget? What actions are we taking? And some of that we will discuss later on. And then my final comment is, as I discussed with you yesterday, Nick, working with the 6 local authorities to say, if our operating model is that we want, we want a good cluster, but to do as little at cluster level as possible, and that we have a hub and spoke model of operating through place with an organisation that has leadership roles at place and teams at place. How best will that then work with authorities to be able to delegate decisions from the cluster, and those places to be able to problem solve? ICBs are being abolished, or we don't have to have them. Health and wellbeing boards might or might not be the best forum with which to think about delegating responsibility. So that's a discussion to have with each 6 authorities. And I think the view of the ICB cluster will be that that may vary by the nature of that, because different places have different trust arrangements, different local authority arrangements. Somerset, to use the example, is 1 council, 1 trust, and the Health and Wellbeing Board is sort of also the ICP, and so they would probably see that as a good forum. And so we need to have those discussions. And then for the cluster board, a discussion with you all about how will trusts be represented, because at the moment it's a joint board under the existing arrangements. When we move to a merged organisation one day, national guidance will be that trusts aren't on the ICB board, but some areas are thinking about provider committees. And my view is the new arrangements will work on or fail by maintaining relationships. The NHS is at its best when it's trying to get problems done. It's at its worst when people hate the other players in the system, and CCGs and trusts and everybody don't get on. So our job is sort of to keep everybody working together and collaboratively and collectively. And I don't want somehow, because trusts aren't on the new ICB board, that creates a division. Our commissioning intent has to work for trusts. So let's talk about that. In the meantime, the joint board that we'll set up for next April will talk to the councils about how best you're represented on that, talk to trusts as well, while we have an eye on future arrangements. I hope that's helpful, just to give a sort of positioning on where we are. I don't know if you want to add to any of that before it's your turn, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments, or we'll move on to Patricia's report. Siobhan.
Can I just check? I mean, the ICB board arrangements in Dorset will continue until the end of this financial year?
Yeah, I think it will be the end of this year. I think for the committees, we've asked governance leads across the 3 ICBs to look at having committees in common. Our REMCOM is already meeting in common in order to deal with things like alignment terms and conditions, for example, Siobhan. Ideally moving to joint committees rather than committees in common, because that becomes a bit easier to brigade the work. The ICB board itself will become a joint committee in our plans. I think that will be the end of the year. I guess we need to give the new chief executive and the executive the opportunity to say, we're a bit stretched serving 3 boards, and so can we move to a joint board sooner rather than later? Does that give you a?
Yeah,
I think it'll be the end of the year, but we give them the opportunity to say if they're too stretched. Anyone else? All right, thank you. Yeah, Forbes.
Just because you put it out there, really. That's in your head. Just if you perhaps could give us an outline timeline as best you see it, where we might get to a bit more clarity about what the future might look and feel like. And I'm asking that at times you have to translate it to patients. Also, a large number of stakeholders I deal with are just wondering how it's going to work, particularly on the back of trying to create new neighbourhoods.
Yeah, so just working backwards, if our job is to develop, enhance neighbourhoods, the capacity to do that will be strategic commissioning capacity to think about what are the outcomes that are most relevant to our population, and then translating that in, you know, liaison with you and with the trust and with other people into what will neighbourhood and the local authorities, what will neighbourhood management look like, where there is problem solving between statutory agencies in order that in the 10-year plan, you know, clusters of around about 50,000, is that right for rural areas or not, can be located together, and we start to see more diagnostics, clinics, therapies given locally in order that the pressure on the trusts is on the acute sector is less. And I guess the theme for that will be maybe I said this yesterday, sorry for those, yeah, maybe the NHS has enough money, it's just got too much demand. And so how do we do that? So if that's the plan, I think looking for a consultation on an executive team to help deliver the capabilities and the teams that are needed to be able to do that task, including place-based arrangements and locality arrangements. I think we see that as something for this quarter, and that by the end of the calendar year there has been consultation on what that structure looks like, and it's being implemented. And as I answered to Siobhan, in that next quarter between Christmas and New Year, by the end of that quarter we've aligned our governance as well through joint committees and a joint board. The thing that is in the national media, and so I think it's all right for me to say something, is obviously for our staff boards, people would like some certainty on what does that mean for the whole structure, and the timing of that reorganisation around what's affordable, you know, as is being played out in HSJ and other places, is obviously something that we're working very hard on in order to give people as much certainty as possible, but conscious that the cost of change is another pressure to be dealt with in the current financial year. Does that?
It's as much as you can give. It's helpful. That's
fine. Yeah, thank you. Sam.
Thank you. Just a quick plea. This is going to be quite tricky to work through, isn't it? You already mentioned health and wellbeing boards, the role of the strategic commissioning, outcomes development at ICB cluster level. Can we just be involved in sitting around so that we avoid duplication? Because already in the 10-year plan, they're suggesting health and wellbeing boards take on responsibility for developing those neighbourhood health plans, if nothing else, just to be efficient in how we do that.
Yeah, I mean, you must be. I mean, I guess the thing to say is there aren't any meetings taking place that you're not involved with. You know, at the moment, we're in the place of the meetings that are happening across the cluster are pretty transactional around can we afford to do, and what's the timing of restructuring and aligning our terms and conditions. So please be assured, Sam, when we actually have some capability and we start some work, you will definitely be at the table. It's not that it's the work has started. We are in pure transition. Yes.
I was just thinking, Sam, that there are a couple of really important points there, aren't there, in you asking that question, because the Local Government Association have pushed back quite heavily on the NHS pilots and their desire to lead that piece on neighbourhood working. And I think that's quite right, because I think what we need to think about moving forward is that actually neighbourhood health is about so much more than what the NHS can do. This is really about the wider determinants. And so thinking through really carefully what neighbourhood health looks like, what health creation looks like actually, and local authorities driving that through the system with the support and alongside of the NHS is going to be really important. All of the health and wellbeing boards in that context. So not losing that thread is going to be absolutely critical to making the decisions that are needed in order to, as I said at the AGM yesterday, to as a minimum stabilise the cost of health, and actually the end goal being to reduce it, because what we want is a healthy population that leads to longer healthy years and economic growth, and so that element is really important. I think this also plays back into the very first item we had around the video, around how are we really going to create a sense of true co-creation with our communities, so that what we're doing is, as public servants, is only intervening where only we have the skills to do what's needed, because our communities are in the driving seat of a lot of the change that needs to come along in the next few years to really bring the 10-year plan to life.
Really interesting comment. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much. So we're on to item 4, your report, Patricia. I haven't done the minute.
We went straight into
at the beginning. Oh, I thought I asked for them. Did I ask for the minutes?
All right. Okay.
I think I did.
Yeah.
I did.
All right.
But
yeah,
thank you.
Thank you. Want us to get out of order.
Thank you for looking out for me, because I'm capable of anything. Over to you.
Okay, item 4. So I'm not going to go through the report in detail because I'm going to assume that you've read it. The few things I want to just pick out for particular focus. Obviously, the planning guidance is out at the moment, and that gives a very clear steer towards the new landscape for health and care, and particularly the move towards strategic outcome-based commissioning. I think it's a really welcome approach to longer term planning, although I think we just need to, the devil will be in the detail, and as we've been here before with 3-year planning, and then had quite major adjustments annually in terms of finance depending on the economic picture, we just need to treat that with a little bit of caution. But what it does do is give us the opportunity to think through a much longer period than we've been able to in the past, and really start to get into the detail of interventions and what we expect the 5 to 10 year outcome to be, especially when we start to get into that area of prevention. So a good start in terms of a new way of working. The ops plan obviously will be covered in more detail later on. We've still got a financial gap. We've got to close that. As 3 chief execs, we met this morning with David and Ellison to work through how we're going to do that, and that'll be covered in more detail later on. But that's a really important part of the medium-term plan. It's getting our health system back into financial balance so that we can invest in the things we need to, and the priority around delivering on those big ticket transformation programmes that we're in the middle of now, because they're a really important step to delivering the leftward shift that's identified in the 10-year plan and getting into that space of health creation. Rob's mentioned the restructure. We continue to assess the risk on business continuity of that. Obviously, you realise that the longer it takes for us to get to a place of starting consultation, that some staff are leaving, and that's going to create business continuity issues eventually. I think there's also some thought needed now in terms of the establishment of the cluster and how the really big priorities continue to be delivered for the 3 ICBs with what might be a much smaller level of senior leadership capacity to be able to do that. So we need to think through that really carefully, because we can't afford to drop any of the balls that are we're currently balancing in the ICB if we want to make sure we not only deliver on the ops plan, but we also, as I said, get pace underneath those transformation programmes. You'll note that in the report it talks about vaccination for a couple of reasons. One, because we're heading into winter, and so flu vaccine and COVID vaccines are really important. And there is still quite a big section of our population that think if you get a flu vaccine that you get the flu. Not true, myth busting. But more importantly, the flu's not serious. And believe me, having worked in the acute sector for a long time, over 38 years, flu kills if it gets into someone who is vulnerable, who's compromised, and who hasn't got the ability to fight it off. And while that person may not be you, you may be the person that gives that vulnerable person the flu if you do not get vaccinated. And at worst, it can be the end. But actually, lots of people end up with long-term scarring of their lungs and can't even do a 10-yard walk without getting out of breath. So please, everybody that you speak to, whether it's socially or professionally, please encourage them to get the flu jab, because it's absolutely critical to maintaining good health through winter. Vaccination is also on there because for the first time in decades, this country is now at the point where we're not reaching herd immunity for childhood vaccinations because of a whole range of reasons, but mainly misinformation on social media. This last few weeks, we've had the first child die in England of whooping cough. That's tragic and it's avoidable. So please, again, if you've got opportunities to encourage families to get vaccinated, please do that. I'm really pleased, having looked at the vaccination performance for this ICB area that Dean pulled this week, that we are into the beginning and mid-90s for vaccination, which is great, but we've still got more work to do, and using our Dorset Insight system to target for support and information of some of our families where vaccination rates are still quite low is really important. In the report, you'll see some priorities for the next few months, which will not come as any surprise to anyone. Things that we really need to focus on: the delivery of the ops plan, the transformation programmes, landing the restructure as quickly as we can, because making an announcement in March and then not being able to give people clarity is causing genuine anxiety and upset. Because people want to know if they're going to be in employment at Christmas. So being able to get some clarity on that through our central colleagues as quickly as possible will really help that situation one way or the other. And I'm happy to take any questions. The other issue, obviously you'll see in the report, the beach building opened a few weeks ago. It's a fantastic piece of work in contribution to the CSR, and huge thank you to Siobhan and her colleagues. Other elements of that building programme continue. The course building will be slightly delayed, DCH, and will be moving forward quite quickly now in the next few months to conclude the ED development and critical care. And we've also had some great capital developments in terms of new eating disorder building and progressing to serious mental health ITU unit for children. So really pleased and proud with some of those developments, actually being the only system in England that managed to get capital through the New Hospitals programme for all of its organisations. And we will now start to see the benefits of modern, clean, safe environments for people to be treated in. And that's a really big achievement for all of us. But happy to take any questions on the report, any clarification that anyone has.
Thank you very much. Forbes.
Yeah, thank you. As ever, it's very interesting. Just 2 or 3 points. First of all, can I, absolutely echo and support Patricia's comments about vaccination. The start of the winter plan is at home by getting immunisation, quite honestly. And, year after year, we see people who, for whatever reason, have chosen not to have a vaccination, but do end up with serious illness. And of course, it's now spreading into the uptake of childhood immunisation. So I always look at staff and I say, as a staff member, I feel it's almost a responsibility, unless you've got an absolute reason for there to be a contraindication to have that vaccination, you should have it. And, particularly clinical staff, but also non-clinical staff as well. So again, I think whatever can be done to encourage the uptake at this time of year, because we're about to start the whole programme now, then in fact, I think the flu vaccines arrived in my practice today, actually. So whatever can be done, it does make a difference. It makes a huge difference. And let's just reflect back to the difference in terms of outcomes for COVID. Having the COVID vaccination it's the same for other things. So don't belittle the potential illness that you can have if you can avoid by having immunisation. The other 2 points quite quickly, just one under 1.3, which is page 23, which is just car park development at Wimborne Hospital. Of course, I welcome the estate's development there. £3 million is a lot of money. You could do a lot with £3 million in terms of services or or clinical rooms, which we are always struggling for, particularly in general practice at the moment. I suppose the broader point is the final comment was easing congestion for patients and visitors and paving the way for expanded hospital services in the future. So what is the plan for expanded hospital services at Wimborne? Because we have done this before, but I'm guessing this is money that's been generated through League of Friends or whatever, although I don't know. We built very nice theatres at Wimborne, and we didn't really use them very well. And it's got to align, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So quite frankly, we're not throwing good money after bad, in essence. And my other point is just on page 30. But I'll just do it as one. Yeah. That's okay, Rob. Page 31, which is around Health Watch. So first of all, Future Health Watch, I was sorry to hear about the changes around Health Watch. I think Louise and her team have done a really good job in Dorset. That would be my view, and the information they've shared and the work they've done with us in the Alliance and the GP community has been very helpful, holding the mirror up to various things that we do. And I just thought I would touch on the 1.2, which is about hurdles for trans people accessing primary care. I think we have to accept that. I think the system doesn't cope well with trans people and their specific needs. We have significant issues about how we manage their different registration, how we then manage health recalls with people who have transitioned either way in terms of cervical screening, etc., breast screening. And it's not for the want of trying, usually in general practice, it's just that the systems around us don't cope very well and aren't really yet fit for purpose for the needs of those individuals. And I absolutely support the comments that there needs to be better.
Thank you. So thanks for the comments on vaccination and trans and Health Watch. I guess we have to come back to Patricia in that the ICB will need capability to analyse data for population health, but then triangulate that through patient experience and engagement. And we'll have to think about how that works. But maybe somebody could answer on Wimborne rather than just part of that.
Thank you. On Wimborne. So thank you, Paul. So this is a great opportunity because it's very rare to get the ability to acquire additional land next to a community hospital site. So very grateful to the support of the friends in Wimborne. In terms of services at Wimborne, there is actually lots of positive change going on. So there's been investment in the radiology facilities at Wimborne. And we're working in partnership with UHD there. The endoscopy service has had favourable JAG accreditation, which is really good. So there's lots happening in the moment. But of course, what we've got on the horizon is the exciting prospect of neighbourhood health centres too, which I think will set a direction for the development of more services to be housed there, which won't only be the traditional health services. It will be coming back to the BCSE and third sector and other partners. It will be a vision of a health hub provided locally. So I think we need to look at the possibility of that for Wimborne.
That answers your question. Thank you. Whoops, sorry, I keep getting logged out. I've logged back in, but sorry. Any? Yes, Rhiannon, and it's got Rhiannon and then Siobhan.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was distracted by my own.
By your IT.
Exactly.
I get it. I am going to come back to the vaccines point because I'm interested to know if we're going to move into using behavioural science, behavioural insights more, because it's heartening to hear that our numbers are pretty good, but obviously we've got the chickenpox vaccine coming online as well. But generally speaking, from a kind of prevention perspective, just telling people what to do doesn't really, in evidence terms, make much difference. So really understanding what the kind of behaviours that you need to tackle with what kind of message is specific. But I'm not clear whether we've got that
sort of
capability in our arrangements currently. So I suppose I'm looking to understand whether we're using it effectively, how we're learning from last year to each year, and how we take that into the cluster. And my other question was on, I think it was Appendix 2, it was the reference to Dorset prevention strategy, so public health. And I guess it's just understanding how joined up that is, how integrated that is, not necessarily across the whole landscape in terms of local authorities, but from a health perspective. I assume it is, but I don't want to assume anything, because in an ideal world, we want to just see a prevention approach, wouldn't we, across the landscape, across the system, rather than individual entities.
Sam, did you want to do both in a way? I mean, do you see
both,
behavioural
okay.
science capability in that?
Behavioural insights are absolutely right. We have a small behavioural insights capability in the public health team. As far as I know, they work on quite defined projects, and one of the challenges with the way vaccinations delivered now is it is quite fragmented. I feel okay saying that as Director of Public Health. It's commissioned by a remote hub. Delivery happens at the point of delivery in primary care and pharmacies. Finding a way of making sure that advice is built in consistently is a challenge. We've got 1.5 people, but I will take the question back just to see what's the opportunity given the advent of the winter plan. Are they plugged into the right people? And are there some subgroups that we're particularly concerned about where there's a really clear opportunity to develop that delivery in a different way? I'll do
one for the strategic commissioning space, I think, going forward.
Just in terms of the reference in the Dorset Council update to the prevention plan, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant opportunity. I'm going to say this should not be a public health plan, because our potential through thinking differently about how Dorset Council is organised and how we work with communities means we need to think about prevention in its broadest possible terms. So this will be a group of people in Dorset Council who are facilitating the organisation to really think, how do we get upstream in all of the different aspects of the business, whether it's place-based services, social care, public health. It's more of a framework and an approach that's going to be very closely tied to our transformation work. So it's early days, but it's a really strong aspiration, and it's got strong commitment from senior leadership team and of course Cabinet, who flagged it in the council plan.
Thanks very much. I've got Siobhan and then Dan.
Just our board met on Monday, just with regard to the coast building. Obviously disappointed that it's been delayed. We were all really keen to get it over the line within this year, and actually it was due to complete so that we would move in at the end of February. The date now we have been very explicit about since Monday, because we wanted to give a date, an absolute date that we are confident of. We're confident of the builders achieving that date and of us being ready to do the moves. And that date is the 20th of July next year. So there are sort of 2 weeks from the 20th of July where we would complete. We're looking at how rapidly we can complete the changes. And just to give you a sort of an example of how big they are, we have about 58 wards across the whole of UHD. This will involve moving 37. So it's significant, and it's just interesting from a people perspective in the organisation. It's actually been a bit of a low because people have been on a bit of a high getting through the changes that we've delivered over the last 3 months. So it is quite interesting now. I think people are pleased now they know a date, and we're also getting some external assurance from actually a global company that does a lot of health changes that's going to come and review our current plan and look at how quickly we can do the transition. So the emergency and planned care split will happen from the 20th of July next year. And then just
a matter of interest, is there any learning? Because the coast building went up in 6 weeks, folks. It was unbelievable. 238 modules, 170 of them were nearby, ready. But then does that mean when we do this type of innovative build, the mechanic and engineering and the other things, or is it a different? What's the learning?
There's a reflection here. Darwin Group is the company that put the build up. They were very excited about getting it out before Christmas, and it was incredible. However, I think then their management of the subcontract was not as tight as it could have been. And actually, they did get back on it, but there was a delay. And that was about upgrades and all sorts of things that needed to happen. But we have had many and various conversations, as you can imagine, with both Darwin Group and Portakabin, who are the sort of parent group now. And we're at a point where we're much more assured of what they're doing currently. And if anybody's been past, there's bricks that go up to a certain point. I've been slightly depressed because the bricks, there's not a lot of activity on the bricks. So I said this yesterday in a public meeting, and I was told, Siobhan, do you not realise the rest of the building's cladding?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I share that because I thought it was quite amusing.
But thank you, because there will be a lot more, you know, prefab buildings built, and so getting the little bit of learning from what happened with Coast is good for us.
And the only final thing I just wanted to mention was NHS net migration. So we've all got new emails across UHD, which is just important to note. And that has saved us £850,000 a year currently. So it's just those things that we can do as a system and together.
Thank you very much, Dan.
I just wanted to highlight the priorities, which 5.1, because I read them as kind of Patricia Miller leaving card. They're kind of, I could hear you saying like, you lot don't lose grip of these. And I wrote them down and kind of started to think about kind of how we as a board kind of keep hold of them in committee. A lot of them go without saying, because they're key important things I'm all aware of. The bit that I just wanted to really pick up on, and I know committees are looking at these, those transformation programs, and how do we as a board assure ourselves that kind of they're on track with the committee, because we all wanted to deliver those three things in this financial year, with all the other stuff going on. So I just found those priorities and the clarity really helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
One thing that it's not in the report because we didn't know at the time, and I must have written it down and not said it, is that we've been chosen as one of the national pilots for neighbourhood health, which is Weymouth. And I think if I've read the report right, the letter that came out earlier on, we're the only of the 3 ICBs in our cluster that have got a neighbourhood health pilot. So that's really positive, but it also just brings me back to what I said earlier on, which is local government's leadership and in this space is going to be critical. Really pleased.
I can see a couple of other people wanting to come in as well on the same thing. So just building on that.
Catch my eye.
I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. The integrated neighbourhood pilot is something we should definitely celebrate. Just two things that are really important to say is, one is that we've had the commitment to very much work to share the learning and to proceed step by step across the two places. So I think that's with the pilot is within the Dorset area, but it's really important that a lot of work was done to develop a bid in the BCP area, and it's important that we continue that work with focus. And Patricia, although it came out with Weymouth in brackets, I think the ICB team has gone back to clarify that, and it's very much the Dorset, but it's the Dorset bid has stood across the whole of the Dorset local authority area. And I know that there is huge excitement from local authority about this.
Anyone else want to comment on that? Did you say? Okay. Thank you very much. Yes, sorry.
Sorry, not on that. I was just coming back to the point on vaccines earlier, and kind of the public health hour at every meeting that we have. So what my deputy chairs the delivery group that we've got on kind of implementing the vaccines across the system. Behavioural insights is talked about at every meeting, so I think we'll put some of the hub. So just wanted to reassure you that kind of we're not waiting for kind of strategic commissioning or anything. Learned from the last 3 years that last 2 years that we've had this vaccine programme on how we improve, and every organisation is committed to the 5% increase that was asked of. As a system, we're looking for at least 70%, which is a stretch from some of the vaccines the reduction that we've seen, because that has gone to the mid-60s in the population, particularly for flu and COVID, and even lower that for RSV over the last couple of years.
Excellent.
If you'll forgive me saying this as a non-exec, it's not helped by our staff rates being so disappointing for vaccination, and I imagine there's a question, Matthew or anyone, about are there behavioural insights on what might change with staff. And this is in my language, the imploring people to do it because it's in the population's health interest doesn't appear to be changing the dial. So is the behavioural insight that you take 20 quid off their parking. So something, you know, we need to some information about what might change the dial for staff might be very useful. Sorry, Matthew.
Not at all. And one of the things which is also true of communities more broadly is you get a much better outcome from peer-to-peer vaccination. That's also true of our hard to reach communities, in that if you can get advocates from within those communities, it makes a difference.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else, anyone? So David, we're on to the BAF, please, and then that takes us into the break.
Just about behaviour insight, you put me in mind of the seatbelts. We campaigned for years and years and years to get people to put seatbelts on. The thing that did it in the end was the annoying little beep you get when you don't click it in. I just wondered if we could just follow people around going beep. Anyway,
Do it through the NHS app though. Get the emergency alert every 10 minutes.
You've got the vaccine.
You're going to turn that off.
That's my new patent for when I go now.
The Miller blip.
In a public forum, Patricia's got a copy. So, colleagues, this is the board assurance framework. In line with our previous discussions at board, we're maintaining the board assurance framework as a means of tracking our key risks and needs in relation to our core strategic priorities. Both the strategic priorities and the BAF, the board assurance framework, need updating, but we've agreed that the overhaul of the BAF will be better served by making it part of the work of the new cluster organisation, because it needs to be based on strategic priorities. And there will be new strategic priorities set by the cluster board. And we've also discussed in this forum improvements we could make to the board assurance model itself. So we thought we'd just package that up and make sure it's done as part of the future ways of working. In the meantime, we've agreed to maintain the NHS Dorset board assurance framework, and it's been reviewed and updated by executive leads to reflect the current developments and in some cases reprioritisation of capacity. And the BAF has been considered at all the subcommittees, the relevant subcommittees, and it's been brought here for noting and approving. And I'm sure exec colleagues around the room can help if there's any specific questions around specific risk areas.
Thank you very much indeed. Are there any questions or comments from anyone, please? So for the exec, are there any resources you think you need to shift around between what we're doing? We can go through the elements and discuss what we're doing on staffing, what we're doing. But I suppose the big question, because the BAF is our oversight document, about are we on track with our objectives, and should we shift any resources around? Do you think there are some resources that we should shift?
I think it relates back to the conversation we started to have earlier about business continuity. So we've done an assessment of business continuity for our critical tasks that we have to maintain for the remainder of the business year. And we've just initiated a piece of work about our strategic priorities, business continuity around our strategic priorities, as alluded to in Patricia's update. So that will give us the outputs we need, Rob, to inform where we need to prioritise and reprioritise.
Just Adrian, kind of not directly answering the question. Obviously, we spend a reasonable amount of time at Risk and Audit Committee going through the board assurance framework. And I think for all the reasons that it needed a scrub down, it's not actually that helpful as a document for making the decision on reprioritisation. What I can do is just thank exec leads for the work that has been invested in it, because we've been very keen at Risk and Audit Committee on behalf of the board to keep it as a live document. And it is now materially less stale than it had become. So I think I've got an increased degree of assurance that the actions and mitigations that are listed are being prosecuted through as a way of mitigating those risks. To your point on, are there things that we would want to do to make sure the risk of dropping the ball whilst everything is so busy? That's more likely, I think, to come to us through the CRR, which I know is as part of our papers for part 2.
Yeah, thank you.
I think just on your first point, Rob, when through the delivery of the operating plan this year, I've been the SRO for kind of what's called work stream 3 and 4, which is where we've looked at commissioning changes, looked at the activity that we're delivering. We've seen during this year the need to really ramp up that work on how we are commissioning, and I've shifted resources during the year into that work because it's more difficult than we've expected, and we've done about 3 different ramp ups of that during the year to try and get further delivery on it. Then the next stage or the latter stage of it was to integrate it with the work with the provider collaborative as well, so that we've got commissioning and provider experts working together on the same challenge, because we found that there was some similar work going on in both the provider collaborative and in the commissioning and not quite connecting. So I've put
that's good, really good feedback to hear that.
And we've enlisted the work of Sarah Mackin has been appointed as the director of the provider collaborative work to bring that together so that we are joined together and delivering in the same direction rather than having at times odds.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else, please? Okay, thank you very much. So we note the item. We are bang on time for our break. So back in 10 minutes. Thank you very much.
Facilities, I think that might be that I can do that first. The original plan, we didn't just doing another issue. So we just read expectations up with state. You know, the figure's not what it's supposed to be. Manage expectations. You know,
You went somewhere with this.
I think she just got your badge sorted out.
Yeah.
So I think you want to do that then at the beginning of lunchtime?
Yeah.
And then
He's going to loop. Back in and out.
they're in the same corridor. So you'd be fine.
Yeah.
But just coming very practically, we are like, I don't know, kind of the US
But that'd be good if I'm. I've almost took Leslie very much on time, so I went into the science from the actual.
Just I'll follow reduced so that we're such an anchor.
Witched myself in.
and we need a strategy. Is that about right? And so I just wanted to emphasise what stood out from the papers a bit.
Agree, absolutely. And we need to think through just how we are going to shape this moving forward, because we've got some indications of where we might go and some clear strategic headings of the areas we want to develop. We haven't actually got to the point that we've got a plan there. And that's the key thing, is to keep pushing that, make sure we're moving forward, and to actually tap into all the expertise that we've got across the whole system and across the board, like Carl, for example.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patricia. And then Forbes.
So just a few things, Kay, thanks for that. Digital, I think you're right, and I think that we did talk at the beginning of this process that whilst the business case that's currently in train is very much about EHR. And actually, how do we get a second phase funded? Because that's actually critical. And if we weren't on the burning platform around UHD and their license around their system, we may well have moved into the out of hospital model first. I think there's a massive opportunity that people are really scared of actually around AI that we've got to start to embrace, because it can resolve a lot of our capacity issues in terms of diagnostic tools. It can move us into a digital first system, but actually really importantly, that and the use of our data on DICE can take us into a much broader aspect of prevention around disease prediction. So I think we've got to really embrace that if we're going to get the most out of it. And given that the national direction of travel through the Secretary of State is that there will be investment in digital, and the centre will no longer be able to use that capital investment to prop up the bottom line, I think we've got to think really carefully about being ready when some of that money becomes available, and what is it going to deliver for the Dorset population.
And that was the kind of discussions we were having around the table with regard to the breadth and scope of paper that we had.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, after you.
Sorry, he's trying to shut me up now. I'm going next week.
Please say more.
In terms of INTs, I know Matthew's been thinking a lot about this and putting leadership in place. But I had a meeting this week, which I need to talk to him about, which I've spoken to David about, with an organisation called the Health Creation Alliance that I've talked to a few times, because they've been in existence now for about 10 years, but I've met them at different conferences. And I think they can really support the delivery of INT, because they come at this from a neighbourhood health from a completely different perspective, which is what we've talked about, which is how do you support communities to create good health in a sustainable way? What does that look like in terms of leadership, offering knowledge, but also supporting real, genuine co-creation with communities, and also bringing the organisations together in partnership to say, how does collaboration around shared purpose really look, so nobody takes decisions in isolation of that as a concept. And that's about getting to the place where you are really genuinely using all of your collective assets to best effect. And so I think there's something there around a conversation with them. Around future care, David's really, it's the reason why I was looking so happy is because he's going to be taking over the chair of future care after next week. But I've laid the ground really well for him. So we are on track with the benefits. We've actually got an opportunity now to go further faster, which is a conversation we're having. We've taken quite a few acute beds out of the system already. We've got more to go. And actually today, we're about to agree the next stage of closures, which is the work to take out intermediate care beds, because we'll move to more of a home-based intermediate care service and strengthening the alternatives to admission. So I think there's a lot of learning for the system, if I'm honest, from future care, and not just because I've been the SRO, but I think that there is something about the way that we track benefits, that we use benefit trackers, that we use the data that's live to show us where we are and keep modifying our journey depending on what it's telling us. But more importantly, when we've got strategic partners, how we manage them. So we've had a really robust process with Newton to make sure that we deliver. Not that they are the delivery of the programme, because they're not, this is our programme. But I meet with them every fortnight to make sure they're doing all the things they need to support the SROs. And we have a very rigorous contract management process with them to make sure we're absolutely realising the benefits that we're committed to in the beginning. So I think there is some learning from that about how we manage strategic partners. One, in a way, I said that they're not seen as the delivery mechanism we are, but being really clear on the expectations and asks of them on a regular basis so that they are absolutely aligned with our teams and doing everything they can to support that.
That's really helpful. Thank you.
Forbes. Thank you. It's just to comment on the digital, Kate's mentioned about sort of slightly contentious and fully support Patricia's overall comments. Just so the board is cited, it has been well rehearsed in other meetings. Now we've got a slight paradox here, which is causing a lot of concern, particularly in the out of hospital sphere, particularly in general practice. And the issue that we have is that the EHR model driven by the national guidance and, quite frankly, funding that was available, is to move the acutes forward with the community model connected to the acutes.
Yeah.
Which therefore by default means we may lose the existing connection that we have between primary and community services. So we've got one strategic direction saying develop neighbourhoods, and the other we're actually disconnecting the community and general practice, and the other arm we're telling patients digital first.
Yeah.
So the whole thing doesn't really triangulate, and it doesn't quite stack up. You know, Matthew and I have spoken, we've met with Beverly, and she's tried to offer some reassurance. Got to be slightly mindful at this point in time because I know they're going through a procurement and assessing systems, and there's, generally speaking, not really a single system that will serve all the needs of the NHS in that. So I have been offered some assurance, and I've fed that back to colleagues, but we've worked really hard on digital in Dorset, and we've got some really good things. We've got the whole of general practice in one system. We've got a degree of integration with our community services. We've got the Dorset Care Record, and we've got the DICE, which gives us a huge amount of population health. We just need to watch as we move through this. We're not losing what we already have, and then we can quite soon hopefully move to a better place. We do accept the acutes need to be brought up to speed. Now, the conversations that I'm involved in actively at practice level and with colleagues are about how we better utilise AI to manage patient access, patient flows, and patient demand. I don't think our colleagues are close to that in the acutes, if I'm honest, because they've said that to us. That's an observation, it's not a criticism. We all want to get to a better place, but we've got to try to develop the good and not lose the good, basically.
Yeah, really helpful. Thank you, Matthew, and then we'll move on.
Right, so those comments about digital and links with primary care are really, really important. I just wanted to pick up on IMCs. I wanted to thank the committee for the challenge about going faster. I think we all want to go faster. I wanted to reinforce that there is a huge sense of energy in what's going on. I guess to gently remind this board that we had a few false starts in terms of business cases being brought and delays, which I think have put us in a position where we could have had the opportunity to have started more quickly than we have. When we look at where we are nationally with neighbourhood health, I think, and as that becomes clearer over the next few weeks, I think we will see that we're in a really good place in Dorset in terms of the foundations that have been put in across the system. And that will allow us to go forward quite quickly. And then coming back to the neighbourhood health pilot, it's really good that we've secured that, and we're one of 4 within the Southwest. So I sort of really just wanted to reinforce the energy that is happening in that space, and perhaps we can, if it's not already been agreed, but agree how this comes back to committee in the future, because one of the things that we will need to work our way through in terms of measuring progress is this isn't like a building that can go up in 6 weeks. It's a sort of way of working and a system at a local level. So we need to measure the success of this through outcomes, really.
Yeah, thank you very much. So that we're not a talking shop today, I guess we're giving a steer as a board that on digital, we expect to see a digital strategy that thinks about our communities and our population and our services and our primary care and what we've built with DICE. We don't just want to see an EPR solution. Exactly. And I think we're not just talking about that. I think we're giving a steer that for anybody working on this, we expect to see a Dorset digital strategy that delivers our ideas for leftward shift and the 10-year plan. And I hope that helps. I think, you know, if we can feed that through the minutes through to everybody, it is difficult, isn't it? Because there are different steers nationally, and it can be a bit like Game of Thrones, you know, and who's leading and who's everything else. I just want to know how we're going to benefit the people of King's Landing, you know, rather than how many dragons Daenerys. So that's probably enough of that. But you know, we are giving a clear steer today that we want to see a digital strategy that thinks about how our GPs and our neighbourhoods will be able to use applied technology to help with the delivery of our priorities, as well as deliver EPR for the accused. Is that fair?
Definitely. And as somebody who kind of participated in that committee discussion, not only how we as multiple NHS organisations and possibly local authority organisations use technology, but how our citizens will use technology, because it's those digital journeys that allow access and progress through those pathways that's going to be really important.
Thank you. So we'll reflect in, not my Game of Thrones comments, but we'll reflect the clear steer that we think what came out of the Outcomes Committee is really, really important. Dan, FPC, please.
Thanks. Sorry, I was late back, and I won't Google where. What's it called? King's Landing is
the capital of Western.
It's not in Dorset.
It's not in Dorset. Yet.
August was the first meeting of the Finance Committee, kind of under a new steer to focus on finance. And I guess kind of one of the things I reflect to the board is finance. The committee were pretty open about, we've lost that link between finance and performance, and that's because we want to focus on the finance, but the P&L in and of itself is not an outcome. So we were trying to balance that with the link. And I know Dean kind of held our feet to the fire a couple of times, which is kind of what we want to do, recognising that the performance pack is on the board for today. We approved the winter plan, which is also on the board's agenda. And then we looked at the forecast and where we were in terms of year to date. Committee welcomed the improvement in MI, the clarity, the reporting. The committee's finding it much easier to follow. And as the report notes, year to date we were where we expected to be. That doesn't kind of reflect the kind of back-ended plan and the committee's concerns about SIP delivery, particularly linked to workforce grit and the balance between bank and agency, as well as substantive posts, and a continued focus on CHC. So we noted where we are, but I guess I'd play back to the board. This is not new. There's lots of risk in this plan in terms of delivering a break-even plan. The committee's going to do some more work on workforce in its September meeting, which is coming up. But really gripping that to enable the SIPs to be delivered is now key to the break-even position, and the committee will continue to focus on that. I'll just pause in case Alison wants to add, but that brings the report to life a little.
That was great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to reflect some other meetings that have been taking place, we will develop a bridge now, then for Alison to identify. So how do we close the gap, and what are the actions, and who's accountable, and when do they need to happen by? And I think we're all conscious that we sort of have to have action now rather than the development of plans. So, I hope that helps. Any other questions or comments for Dan, please? No one online? No? Okay, thank you very much. People Committee.
Yep, thank you. So just by way of brief introduction, because it's my first board meeting.
Sorry, I should have welcomed you to your first face-to-face meeting.
No problem. So I'm Carl New, non-exec member. Day job, I run technology and digital services across 3 government departments and 13 agencies. So quite a lot, more than happy to get involved in any digital discussions, cyber, all that kind of stuff. So please do involve me in those, and I'll aim to get more involved. So
thank you.
Also a non-exec at Bournemouth University. So back to the People Committee then. So new committee focused on 2 items, which is the business continuity risk, which has briefly been mentioned already, and capability and capacity in that sort of space, and then also HR leadership and operational capacity. I guess the reflections coming out of both those items were just the kind of level of uncertainty that's being dealt with at the moment, particularly around structures and cost. So no items to escalate and nothing to refer to any other.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Someone online? Okay, thank you very much, Carl. That's really good. Quality and commissioning, please.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Obviously, this also first committee in its new scope, which is quality and commissioning. It was good to have one of the NEDs from UHD there, and also we benefit from Chief Nurse who's bringing a provider perspective. We did need to kind of further strengthen the commissioning side of the terms of reference. So there's quite a bit of discussion in that, but we did approve it. Obviously, we want to really take the opportunity in terms of what we can influence, I suppose, during this period in terms of commissioning opportunities. We did approve the process for commissioning intentions, but recognising, you know, that can be quite dynamic in terms of what those opportunities might be as we try to dovetail, I guess, with the strategic commissioning opportunities. We did receive the quality report, and we noted the staffing shortages in maternity and neonatal services at Dorset County Hospital, and that's due to the closure in Yeovil District Hospital maternity unit. But there are mitigations, which is obviously the assurance we were seeking in using secondments and recruitment. We're also keeping an eye on the uptick in stillbirth rates in UHD in particular, so that is one to keep an eye on. So we had quite a lengthy conversation, didn't we, earlier around vaccines, and so we received we thought we were receiving the timeline for the delegation of vaccines and screening to Dorset ICB. However, that timeline isn't forthcoming at this point in time, so it's yet to be confirmed. But again, I think in terms of the conversation we're having earlier with Sam, there'll be opportunities for us to be perhaps less fragmented going forward when it comes across. We received the primary care delivery group escalation report, and we were particularly concerned about one of the pharmacies failing to meet its contractual obligations, but it was particularly in the context of long-term viability, so there was quite a bit of discussion around that. We also received the quality group system quality group report, and a good piece of engagement and discussion they'd had around a deprivation of liberty safeguard issue. There are no significant issues for escalation to the board, but we are keen in a future committee to have a kind of workshop approach to increasing our understanding about what the document that NHS England have produced in terms of strategic commissioning framework, and how we can really try to get more into that space of what the opportunities are in the here and now and going forward. So hopefully we can make that happen. In terms of the risk register, from a quality and safety perspective, obviously we looked at all of them through that lens. Of particular noting is the risks around SEND services in DCP. Risks remain high around that due to the increased risk around the transition arrangements. Also, we discussed the particular service gaps in neurodiversity services for both children and adults with autism and ADHD, which is of particular concern. A graduated response model is being developed to try and avert the risks there. And there were no other items for referral to other committees. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed. It's really good. Any questions or comments from Rhiannon and Rachel?
Just a couple of comments. So I think the timeline for the delegations actually possibly, and it probably will be delegation because the Secretary of State still has to have a responsibility around health protection, will be April 27, but with an intent from April 26 that clusters are much more closely linked in with NHS England in the decision making, and it feels different. So that will be something to really work. We're looking forward to working, and that we're building towards that. So that's just a marker on the strategic commissioning framework. It might be worth the ICB, and I know colleagues will be thinking about just looking at the capabilities. I mean, it plays into the discussion David, you're having about also the capabilities that you might need going forward across the whole system potentially, and there's opportunities to do that work sooner rather than later, rather than wait for any kind of national product. Yeah. So we're keen in the southwest that we could probably go a bit further, obviously accepting capacity constraints at the moment, and support in terms of doing development together, given our collective commissioning expertise across the region.
Really useful to understand those timelines and those possibilities. Thank you, Matthew.
I think just leading on from that, I think one of the issues that this report begins to bring to the board is probably an opportunity in the new cluster arrangements to think about the fragility and cost actually of acute services between Dorchester and Yeovil. So the maternity example, which I know is a temporary closure from Somerset's point of view, but is a good example of this. And I think from a Dorset system point of view, what we've got in DCH is a provider that we know is subscale. We know we've done some work around the drivers of the deficit, and there's some costs involved in that. And we've got the opportunity in the new cluster to do a strategic piece of commissioning, looking more widely for the Somerset population as well, to determine what the future of acute service configuration should look like in this area, and then how we get there in a financially sustainable way.
Well, I think that's a really helpful comment, Matthew, and something that I'll take away and discuss at cluster level and with the new CEO, because I think you're right, and actually we ought to take a cluster-wide look probably at fragile services, because they can overlap between ICB. So I think that's a really helpful comment, and we'll have some discussions on that and see if we can respond to it. Thank you.
I just asked Steve and Pam if they had anything to add, so apologies I forgot to.
Yes. Pam, do you have anything to add?
Reflection about our discussion.
Right, thank you very much. And then last but not least, oh sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Forgive me.
That's quite all right. Just a brief comment. If we're touching on fragile services, and it's been raised in this report, another increasingly fragile service we have is community pharmacy. Yes. So I do declare an interest here, because I now practice in a town that has no community pharmacy, no open community pharmacy in the town. 2 pharmacies have closed, and the neighbouring pharmacies are overwhelmed with demand. And so a large number of frail, vulnerable people for whom access to their prescribed medication is very important, has been a real challenge in recent weeks. But it's a recurring and common problem across particularly our rural communities. Yeah. And there's no obvious solution, quite honestly, in sight. We've got the PNA that's just finished its consultation. I'm not sure how reflected it's been in that, but I just think, you get the fragility in acutes, but community pharmacy is part of the community genuinely in terms of health and well-being. And
well, thank you for that. And again, for the cluster, there is a lot of commonality around the issues of rurality for Dorset, Somerset, and Wiltshire. And so I think for a minute that we'll raise that as a priority to look at for review. Nick.
It's not just a rural problem. If you look at Portland, which is a population of well over 10,000 people, I think there's only one pharmacy.
Yeah. And then Sam, and then Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Noting your comments about not just being a talking shop and sharpen this into action.
I wish I hadn't said that.
If Forbes's comment about the pharmacy needs assessment was really important. At the moment, it's not a mechanism whereby we can influence control of entry into the market, but it does measure where the gaps are in services. Yeah. So as the ICB becomes the strategic commissioner, it's going to be a very important document if you're going to move into that strategic market shaping, which I think we need.
Yeah, and indeed a lot of that happening at place level. on our operating model, Forbes.
I don't want to hijack the conversation, but the PNA, perhaps what I have been told that one of the indices or markers in the PNA is is there access to a pharmacy within 10 miles? Is that correct?
Double check it.
We've got. I haven't read the document, and that was just read back to you. But even if it's close to that, in rural Dorset, 10 miles, if you're a normal person, it's an awful long way with no access to public transport.
Yeah.
Unless you've got someone who can take you there. Now, of course, there are remote pharmacies, but we're not quite there yet with remote pharmacies for many people. And so I think the assessment needs to reflect real life.
Thank you. Thank you very much for raising it. Rachel, I've kept you waiting.
It was just, I'll be brief. It's an escalating issue nationally, and it's interesting. I've had a couple of conversations this week. I think it would be good to recognise obviously the rurality and how we address some of the rurality issues in the context of, but it's also, as colleagues rightly saying, about market management, which I think links to skills around strategic commissioning. This one is rising very fast, and it's something we need to pick up. So it would be an opportunity to do some work around it, possibly linked to the integrated, to the neighbourhood working as well, and whether there's some innovative solutions around, if not static, then sort of mobile pharmacy, but it is a big issue.
Really helpful comments. Good discussion. Sorry, Pam.
Drones were put forward.
Drones.
Yeah. Sorry?
Drones.
Yeah, they would be. They'll get shot down if they go another ICB area. Okay. By the way, thinking of topical news, Peter Pan.
Oh,
interesting to know. Last but not least.
Thank you,
Chair.
Chair.
Risk.
Yeah, it was a cracker of a committee. So, like, as with colleagues are reporting, it was the first in the new format. Not a lot of change in our coverage, but we did have representatives from the non-execs at both Foundation Trust, which was helpful. It was a relatively straightforward agenda. The main focus was the emergency preparedness, resilience and response, so basically contingency planning. So we gave that a good workout, and it was in very good order, basically. I think my observation, both in this organisation and in previous organisations, is this is the kind of stuff that you only truly value when you're in an incident, and then it's too late to prepare the plans. So kind of all of the work that goes into the non-glamorous activity around preparing and exercising these plans is really, really important, and it was good to see them to be in good order. We also stepped through a sort of self-assessment that had been done around data security and protection, which was also in good order. We also received a report on the self-assessment against the cyber assessment framework, which NHS England have put out, where again, pleasing to note that the organisation meets the expectations. Not in the escalation report, but just to share a bit of colour, the expectations that were in that document were sometimes to not yet have met the standard. So simply because we've met the expectations doesn't mean to say that all of the work necessary has been completed. And I've got in my chair capacity some follow-up with Paul Johnson's team, just to understand the areas where we are not yet fully compliant with the expectations, because there are residual risks associated with our cyber assurance framework, basically, notwithstanding the fact we meet the expectations of NHS England. And I think the rest of the report can stand.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Again, casting an eye over all the papers, is there some comments from you about cyber risk, and are we adequately reflecting a cyber risk in our thinking?
So there's an ongoing conversation between kind of risk and audit committee through me and the management team through Paul, just around where we should score cyber risk in terms of likelihood and impact. And the comfort I think I can give around this table is that all of the mitigations that you would expect to see appear to be in place. Yeah. I think that the observation, though, is that, and this is not unique to Dorset ICB or indeed to the NHS, cyber risk is existential for the majority of organisations, and it is the type of risk that would normally be featuring on a board's risk register. Yeah. And we've just got a little bit of a disconnect between the way that the mechanics of risk assessment work versus the way that's translating into what's visible in the board's corporate risk register. And I'm planning to resolve that conversation with Paul, hopefully over the next month.
Okay, thank you, Nick.
I guess from a local authority point of view, if you look at our risk register, cyber is quite at the top.
Yeah,
it is for us. And you just have to look around what's happened to Marks and Spencer's, Jaguar Land Rover just this week. And if you get hit, it's going to hit you badly. And people can die.
Yeah,
that's reality.
I can't think of another board that I'm on or anywhere where cyber isn't. The likelihood is extremely high. And having lived through a ransomware attack in a group of 50 odd schools, the disruption that gets caused for at least 6 months is massive. And it's all the unintended consequences that you don't think about immediately in that recovery plan, which need to be thought through. Is my reflection.
So maybe as Ned, again, if it's helpful, we could just give a little steer that, of course, we understand where exec colleagues are. It's not here today, but for us, with our external perspective and experience in other organisations, and the comments also from the leader, it's a sort of no-brainer. We must have a high level corporate risk on the risk register, and because the experience, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. So Monty Python there. It's all cultural references today. We absolutely, I think for non-execs, it's a no-brainer. It has to be there. If that reflects how non-execs feel, and maybe you could feed that back.
I'll pick that up in the conversation with Paul.
All right. Thanks very much. Thanks for comments, Dan.
Corporate risk register is on the part 2 agenda. Can we add to that steer something on timing? Because with thanks to Adrian, I know this has been an ongoing conversation. I know audit committee doing some work, but sat here early September for a November audit committee. I think we need to get through this quicker than kind of a couple of months. So I wonder if we could add to that steer about doing this quickly now.
Yeah, sort of immediately, please, and we can cover that in part 2 if there's any concerns about that. Everyone. Yeah, of course you can.
So I just think that I support everything that's been said. And I know this is not what you meant, but I wouldn't want us to get into an environment if Ned's worried about something operational, we have to change it. Because we're in the thick of this. What I do think is that the committees are there around assurance, and if we're not happy with the score, then what we should be doing is making sure the process that's being used to get the score is appropriate. And if it's not, and that changes the score, and I think that's where we'll get to, then that's what we should be doing. What we shouldn't be doing is if our NEDs think something needs to be higher and we don't, that actually the natural progression is, well, we change it then. We need to find some common ground and agreement, because I think the assurance committee is about checking the process that we've gone through, that you are assured we've gone through the right process to get to the right score. And I think what we'll find when we do this piece of work is we haven't used that process.
Yeah, look, I understand that. I guess in part, Patricia, we're probably coming to it from a smell test, that when it goes wrong, the idea that we haven't had it at the highest level of corporate risk register is a sort of career defining thing for everybody involved. So I think we're trying to give a reality check about what we see in other organisations. So it's not only a technical thing, but
I think what we find is what our team have done is looked at the process of likelihood versus impact, and what they've scored as likelihood is based on the experience within our system, not the experience nationally and what's likely to happen. When that review is done and that score, you'll see that it's about how we've used the process to get to the score.
I understand that. Think of local authorities, libraries faced state-sponsored cyber intervention.
We've had it in the school.
And it's not because Russia wants to take over our libraries. And we're going to commit a big fraud. It's that they wanted to take a look. They wanted to see what are the vulnerabilities, will we be noticed, what will happen. And so in a way, this is one of those unique areas where the impact might not be on us. Actually, people have, this, Carl, people are having the opportunity to come in and have a look. And do they get noticed or not? And are we vigilant, and do we notice? Can impact on another organisation.
They already be on the network.
They may already be.
They assume breach is the standard. So without understanding that, knowing, it may well be 2-3 years time before anything happens. And does it? So I think there is a link to the digital strategy as well in terms of that from steer from the board, because when you look at the paradigms that we've got in place to protect organisations, many still are using old technologies and old approaches, which is secure the perimeter and assume that once that's fine, everything will be okay, but it only takes one brief. So I think that needs to be considered in light of the risk appetite and then what the investment plan might be alongside that digital strategy.
Well, can I just, only to try and wrap all those things together. So thank you for the steer, Dan. Understand the urgency. I've been doing my best to drive that urgency, and with this helpful action, we'll, I'm sure, close it out. Patricia will be happy in having a conversation very much to get to what we, I think, share as a view of where the outcome will be, but through an appropriate process, and not just because I say so. But in terms of understanding the risk, I think we've had a very good conversation about the risk. And from a risk and audit committee perspective, we are assured about the mitigations that are in place. The curious thing is that it's not appearing as a risk on our risk register at a corporate level, given what we know about the existential concerns.
That's a good discussion, and you know, it's good to air these things in a constructive way. Sam?
Just a little worry. I've just been co-piloting away in the background. And that's how many.
You're getting a bit obsessed with that.
How many organisations have reported cyber incidents in England in the past 18 months? Actually, there's no public source of the information. So that's a worry in itself, isn't it?
That's really interesting. Thank you. All right, that was a really good discussion. Thank you very much. So we are on to the integrated performance report. Dean, and as I say, you'll bring colleagues in as needed.
Thank you. And really the focus of bringing this here today is because we don't do the operational performance through the board subcommittees. So each of the board subcommittees that have got a section like the quality committee, they did look at the quality element of the performance report. So what I'm going to report back here today, and obviously we open for questions on the other parts of it, but I want to focus on the operational performance because that's the bit that hasn't been assured through the board subcommittees. And so that's why it's on the agenda in this part of the agenda as well. Because normally I haven't said much about it in this meeting because we've done it all through the performance and productivity committee. So you might remember that arrangements for performance changed from July, kind of with the region taking on now the responsibility for performance management of providers and of ICBs as well. That is at coup level, so I join that on a weekly basis along with the chief operating officers of the providers. Each week we have a different focus from emergency, elective, cancer, mental health and community through each of those meetings, some of them combined in some of the weeks. But clearly it's still relevant to us because our operating plan commits on the delivery of those operating standards. And we need to commission as an organisation to deliver those operating standards that exist. And our plan commits us to the delivery of all of the standards for this year. Dorset also has the responsibility for ambulance commissioning as well. So we report the ambulance position, the South Western ambulance position through our report. If I come on to the performance now of Dorset, I think those who've been on the board for a while will have seen that Dorset has a history of delivery on the operational standards. We do really well. And I was only looking at the regional system report last night. And Dorset is the only one with none of the services and no trust in tiering at the moment. Every other system has got either in tier 1 or tier 2. So tiering is the escalation process that happens at a national level. Tier 1 involves the national team, tier 2 just involves the regional team, across 4 domains of urgent care, elective care, cancer and diagnostics. And Dorset is not escalating in any of those domains. So that's a really good marker of the worry that there is, or lack of worry that there is on the Dorset system for this. So I say that really as background because often the performance report can be overly optimistic, I think, at times, or sometimes overly pessimistic as well, because you pull out the things that are going wrong. And I try to do a balance of the two. So having said that, the positive side of things, I'm now going to go on to the things that slightly worry me. So urgent care, I think there are 3 areas that worry me at the moment. First one is the operational performance at the Ambulance Trust. So South Western Ambulance across the whole of the South West have not met the trajectory that they expected to meet for the last 3 months. So they're currently putting together a recovery plan for that. We had the operational executive committee last week, and that's a process for that. Having said that, the Dorset position of the category 2 response time. So that is for urgent responses, and is about 60% of the activity that the ambulance trusts actually respond to. We are within, so 28 minutes is the response time on average that we get in Dorset from South Western Ambulance. Our trajectory is 32 minutes, and the standard within the operating plan is 30 minutes for this year. So we are better than that. Partly delivered through the improvement that we've had in the hospital handovers, which has significantly increased this year by introducing what was called the trust handover protocol. And now that makes sure that if an ambulance gets to 45 minutes, there is an escalation process that kicks in that means that we actually allow the patients to get into hospital and don't get stuck in the back of an ambulance. So that's one area of concern. The next one is the 4-hour performance, and we have been achieving this, but just looking at the August figures, which aren't published yet, it looks as if we are just below our trajectory of 75% against a 76% trajectory. So that's one to watch. I know the trusts are managing that, and they've really got a focus on it, but that's one just to keep in the background. And the last one, which isn't a target within there, but has something that we've discussed for the last 3 years since we've been an ICB, is no criteria to reside figure. It's around 220 at the moment. It has been as low as 216 earlier this week, which is the lowest point that we've actually had, I think, in ever since we've been an ICB. So we are seeing some signs, but it is variable. So when I looked at it last night, it's back up to 230 again. But that number was 370 when we started an ICB. So there's been a real improvement there. With the focus of the Future Care programme, we talked about that earlier. We've looked at it through the Outcomes Committee. It is really kind of showing some benefits of how we can impact on the system. In elective care, we had 15 65-week waiters at the end of August. We should only have 2 by the end of September, and they're really difficult patients where we're waiting for supplies to be available to treat those individuals. And on 52 weeks, we continue to improve on the number of people waiting a year for treatment, delivering our position. So really, it's for the board to notice the position that we've got on performance. The only one thing I did want to say is earlier this week, the league tables were produced. And across Dorset, we've got 2 acute trusts in segment 3, 1 being the best, 4 being the kind of the worst. Dorset Healthcare is a 2, and South West Ambulance is a 4. So being a 4 kind of reflects, I think, some of that position on their category 2 response. If you look wider to the cluster that we are joining as well, there is a mixture of kind of ones in category 2 to another category 4 as well. So we will be adding to both the extremes of that, those that are good and those that need some improvement. So just a bit of context for the wider cluster as well.
Thank you. And Dean, from your perspective, are you comfortable with all the actions in place against those 4 areas that you highlighted? Or it's important if you tell us if you think, we're not quite taking sufficient action. So what's your advice to us?
So I am happy with well, the one area that I wasn't content with was on the ambulance category 2 response times. We have seen an improvement month on month from them, but it's not meeting the trajectory, which is why at the formal meeting that we had with the Operational Executive Committee, I asked for a full recovery plan on that. And I think that's probably strengthened by the fact that the league table's coming out with and being put in segment 4. So it's something that I'll work particularly with Rachel and Region with on the improvement that we need from that regulatory perspective.
Rachel.
So we'll wrap around, Dean and I will work very closely around as you say, SWAST as an organisation, both in terms of then your commissioned performance versus the organisational stuff, because some of the 4 is also linked to things like staff surveys, and provider colleagues will know that's an annual assessment, and sometimes it's quite hard to shift. It doesn't mean that there isn't a plan, and that links to the strategy work and the people plan that Patricia and I have talked about. I'm going to say, obviously it's a public meeting, and therefore for public record, the performance report, but we do have a number of queries regarding the figures in the board report, and it's just something we need to pick up. So I need to note that because it's a public meeting. So we've got quick figures around 12-hour ED, CYP access you might want to comment on, Dean, just in terms of that being still quite challenging, I think, for the system, and we mustn't lose sight of mental health and RTT, time to first appointment. And the only reason I think for elective, colleagues will know that politically at the moment that is quite rightly a real focus for ministers, and therefore things like 52 weeks, 65 weeks are going to be absolutely under scrutiny.
So you'll pick those
Yeah,
up.
we'll pick it up. It's solvable, but I think it's just worth noting.
Thank you very much. Any other comments, Sam?
I just wanted to raise the issue of prevention, if that's okay, through the lens of the system performance report, because actually I'd like to reflect on some really, really good progress. Before 2022, Dorset ICB, when it was first formed, had really, really high age and sex adjusted admissions for stroke. And we used that through the health and wellbeing boards to sort of kickstart some of the work around the ICP strategy. Looking today, in March 24, the ICB was the fourth worst in the country in terms of the proportion of people, GP registers, who were treated to target for hypertension. You're now in the top 10 within a year.
Yeah.
And I just want to say, as Director of Public Health, you don't often see that sort of change. And there's a huge number of people who are involved in that work, not just in the ICB, but the leadership, the focus, and the tools like DICE have really given everyone involved in that the opportunity to chase that target down.
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant work, and I just reflecting on it's a great shame that every time things start to work really well, we change the system, and I really wish it would stop.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, and sort of well done to everybody. That system response, and not least GPs. So let's celebrate that. Thank you. Really good point. Rhiannon.
Yeah,
and then Dee.
No.
Just to understand a little bit more around the category 2 issue and the intention in terms of admission avoidance. What I'm reading is quite a bit turning people away or finding different pathways once they're already at the front door. But I'm quite interested in understanding more about the efforts and intentions in terms of keeping people at home. I know you talk about the reablement, and I suppose I'm curious, particularly through the lens of SWAST, it could potentially have an impact on their category 2 response if they're doing more in terms of going out to respond but not taking people in. Obviously they're holding more of a risk. So it's just understanding whether that is impacting potentially and how much effort's going into the kind of supporting people at home.
Yeah, thanks, right. And I'll just take Nick and then finish with you.
It was just following on from Sam, and it was reflection on what Dean said very early on his report about the tiering. So as a politician, I'm always very keen to push the really good stuff that Dorset Council does, for example, rather than react to stuff about the council. And so it's a sort of, the league tables are out this week, which probably wasn't great news, because with our positions, we should be pushing the really good stuff. So I don't know what our comms are doing, but
no, it's really good advice, and let's sort of make sure that we have an outcome that we want to have some comms on the good work that's taking place and where the dial has been shifted. Dean, you too.
Thank you. So a couple of things to respond on. Thank you, Rachel, for mentioning the data active, because we picked that up last night, and we've been trying to do some comparison with the regional report that comes out, the Federated Data Platform, and our DICE information. So there is a myriad of data that gets published, and you would expect it all to say the same things, and it doesn't always. So we're having to do some of that. And actually what you've raised is there's quite a discrepancy between the Federated Data Platform view of 12 hours, people who are waiting 12 hours in the emergency department, and what we're reporting through DICE. I haven't got an answer for that yet, but we will investigate that and understand it. I know when you look at the technical definitions, there is a slightly different technical definition, but I don't think that would change that amount of difference between that there is there. So we are live to that, and we are expecting to move to the reporting through the Federated Data Platform once we've got kind of confidence with it, and an understanding how we use it. But all of our data flows at the moment are set up through the DICE system to produce the wonderful SPC charts that we've got, and the performance report. So it's something that as a cluster we will need to work through on how we produce our performance report, because the federated data platform is there doing a lot of that job for us. It's just our systems at the moment aren't set up to use it. They're set up to use DICE. So that doesn't deny the fact that the underlying data should still say the same thing.
Yeah.
So we will get to the bottom of it and we will solve it. And I would expect that to be at least understood by the time we have the next board meeting.
Any other questions from
Just responding to
Yes.
Rhiannon's point, on it's a really good point what you make on how the ambulance trust can respond in a different way to help us, because part of the operating plan this year has been an increased effort on what's called hear and treat. So where patients call up and then the treatment is provided without conveying them to another location to treat them. At the moment, South West Ambulance Service is one of the best in history of doing hear and treat, but some of the others are now getting greater levels of hear and treat. So our ambition was a 4% increase in hear and treat rates from 15 to 19% during this year's operating plan. They've not managed to get to that level yet. They're still working through it, and there's work going on with each ICB to look at what the opportunities are for that. And we've put in a kind of an improvement method through each ICB so that the ambulance trust and the ICB and the trusts are working through what they can do locally for supporting patients without being conveyed to another one. You're right about it's increased risk for them. And I know from doing a visit to them, just listening to what they have to go through to try and connect the right clinicians together to hold them in their own homes by getting appointments with their GPs, speaking to the right person in the practice to get it through. It's very time consuming, and understand why they actually need a lot of resource to actually deliver maintaining somebody in their own home in the local community rather than taking them to hospital, because that's the easy thing to do, because they put them in the ambulance and off they go.
Thank you. Forbes.
I don't want to protect it, but it's an interesting point. It's a conversation for outside of here, and we've raised it before, and no Patricia's aware of it. So there's this concept that hear and treat is the be all and end all. And that is great if it gets someone at home. But sometimes you find, as a general practitioner, the ambulance crew has spent so long at the home trying to keep that person at home, they could have probably conveyed 3 or 4 people to hospital. And that has an effect on the response times. So there's got to be some triangulation of that. You know, we just don't have that length of time. And I'm not saying they do or don't, but they can be there for an hour, 2 hours. Patients, of course, like it because they've had a lot of attention. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You've just got to offset that with response times in other areas where we're sat with a fairly sick patient who we can't get
because you're waiting
to hospital. And I don't know where that piece of work takes.
But that forms part of your discussion, I guess, as the commissioner.
Absolutely it is. And what we've done as commissioner this year is we've produced what we call scorecards by each ICB that looks at a range of indicators, hear and treat being one of them, handovers being another, and using that data to use more of a quality improvement methodology with each ICB to understand what they can do to improve their overall rates, because it's not just about hear and treat, it's about how we're dealing, what the outcome is for the individual patient. And usually the outcome is the right category response for that individual, either staying at home or going into hospital.
Thank you. Anyone else? I had a quick question. I was interested, Matthew and Siobhan, I think the report mentions overperformance in mental health, and Siobhan, I think we discussed some overperformance in elective at UHD. It's just interesting to ask you about, does that go into next year and a risk of recurrent unfunded activity, or is it something that you see overperformance as once off and you'll trim that this year, but it doesn't go into next year?
It's quite complex, isn't it? Because actually what we're trying to do is drive down waiting times. So you're back to sort of thinking about the patients. And I think part of our conversations locally are bearing in mind our financial position, you know, what is the run rate and what are we doing? So I do think there'll be more of a focus on that through the autumn and the winter. I think our philosophy generally is to try and do the right thing for patients within our financial envelope. and we will continue to do that. So there's a really good point. And I think it's something that we're drilling into about whether over the latter part of this year, we look at how much overperformance there has been on acute activity.
And then the issues between mental health and physical health are quite different, because as Siobhan has described, for physical health, it's a waiting list that you're going into. It's almost your forward work, and how far forward do you go if you're overperforming. The two aspects of mental health that are highlighted are the being ahead of the plan in terms of reducing the length of stay for adults in acute mental health wards. So that's more of an issue or a success in the here and now in terms of reducing that length of stay. And what we've done over the past few months is we've really focused on reducing the number of people who are being cared for and treated out of the Dorset area. So this is a key marker of quality in mental health, in terms of the need for people to be cared for as close to home as possible. So we've been successful in reducing that number down to 0 by the end of August. It's a national ambition to get it down to 0 by the end of next March. And the other area is small numbers of people in terms of adult inpatients for who've got learning disabilities or autism being in care. And so what the report is stating is that we are ahead of the trajectory, but the number is very small. So again, that's a really good thing, but the dynamics are quite different from future waiting lists.
Okay, thank you very much for the answers. It's a really interesting area, isn't it? And I guess bringing down waiting lists and overperformance has its merits, but if it's going to happen next year, we need to make sure we deliver SIPs and more SIPs this year in order to fund it. We can't. We have to balance, and that puts pressure on us to make sure that we have the budget that delivers the activity that you plan.
That's right. But just to be clear, Rob, that doesn't, what you've said doesn't apply for the mental.
No, I get that.
And the other slight complexity is where in the system there is ERF, which is income, which at times is released to incentivise you to keep delivering activity and to bring your waiting times down faster. So it's a pretty complex picture.
Rachel, do you see any signals of more release of ERF, or too early to tell, or none?
I don't see any signals of any funding whatsoever. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Thanks for that, Dean. So we're on to governance arrangements. David, over to you.
Well, in fact, I'm going to pass to Liz, because Liz and the team have done that.
Thank you.
Following the board.
You wrote the agenda. You should have just put Liz. Go on.
Following the board meeting in July, where the board approved the new committee structure. The new committees met in August and they agreed their terms of reference and recommend those to come to board for approval. So we've got 4 new terms of reference: finance and planning, outcomes, people, quality and commissioning. And we have 2 updated terms of reference, which were risk and audit committee, where we amended the attendees and the frequency, and also the remuneration committee, where we had to make some updates, following the stand down of the people engagement and culture committee. These versions have taken into account the feedback we had at the committees and some subsequent conversations around realignment of membership. They're coming to the board today for approval. Bolting on to those is the scheme of reservation and delegation. That's also been updated in alignment with those change committee arrangements, and that's also for approval. The decisions map is included to the board for information, just for noting. We've also updated the nomination protocol for partner members for the board. There's no changes to the procedure itself, but there's an update there around the stepping down of the People Engagement and Culture Committee, which just changes the makeup of that nomination panel. And again, that's just for noting.
Thanks very much indeed. Any questions or comments? Are we happy to note, please? Yes, we are. Can I say well done? It's not easy sort of changing terms of reference and committees and what everyone's doing, and getting it to the board and getting everyone's comments on board. It's really done very well, and the fact that we've had very straightforward discussion that is a credit. So let me be nice.
It's all credit due to.
Yeah, no, well,
Steph and the
really,
team who've
really,
done
really
the
well
draft.
done. Sometimes these things don't get the credit they deserve. It's absolute credit. We have a company secretary, handling these things so well, if I can say to you, as the CEO.
Keeps telling us she's brilliant.
Winter plan, please.
Thank you. It's me again.
Unless it's going to be Liz again.
This one isn't Liz. This one is Becky.
Right, there we
who
go.
joins us on time. And if I can make a link back to your reference earlier on Games of Thrones. And kind of King's Landing. I did just look it up. Winter did not come to King's Landing. It only snowed on one evening.
Very good.
So just make that link.
Winter is coming.
It doesn't mean much to some people in
Yeah,
the room.
it
So
means
I'll
a lot-
stop the
means a lot
analogy
to
there.
me.
So winter. Winter is obviously coming. We know the weather has changed, and it's the time when the NHS comes under most intense pressure. Each year we plan for this because we have we produce a system plan. We can't always predict what is going to happen and when it's going to happen, but we prepare for when it does happen and how we can recover from that. And that is what the plan is about. I think our experience in Dorset over the last year is that each year we've become more resilient than the previous year, and we've had a better winter than the previous year. And we've done that by planning and improving the way that we deliver services all the way through the year, not by having a winter fund that we decide in summer how we are going to spend, because the system has not been there for us to do that, and actually has helped us in how we plan for the winter. So each year we've had fewer escalation calls that we've needed, but it has still been tough, and it still will be tough this year that we get. And what we found is that when we do have the really difficult days, surges of activity happen over a few days, we are able to recover more quickly. So this year we've had additional resource into our planning for it through the Future Care programme. So we started this in January, and it's all linked to how we deliver our services over the winter period. And today we're bringing the winter plan to you for sign off of the board assurance statements that are in the document. So that's the ask of the board. I'll just hand over to Becky now just to give you a flavour of what the winter plan and the main elements are of it.
Thank you, Becky. Over to you.
Thank you very much. As Dean said, so the primary, you've got the documents within the pack. There are kind of three main components. One is the assurance statement that the ICB board needs to agree to. So this is part of a set of assurance statements. So each of our NHS providers is also will take them through their boards, and then they all get submitted at the end of September. So a slightly different approach to how we've had in previous years. We have had sight of our partners' draft statements. They're all obviously going through different times depending on the boards. And they are aligned at this present time. So we would expect, we will do a final check on that through the UEC delivery group before the end of the month, but our expectation is that we will all be able to submit a set of assurance statements that are in sync with each other. The other documents that you've got within there is a quality impact assessment that went through the system panel last week and was supported to come to board. There are just with a couple of small kind of tweaks or additional kind of information that was asked for as part of the data ask. And then the final appendix that you've got is the winter planning kind of summary document itself. So this is very much taken through a system lens and kind of fits like pieces of a jigsaw with provider plans. So it doesn't cover everything that's in everybody's plans. It really pulls on the big parts that we know that will make the difference. And I guess in that context, I wanted to draw your eye to a couple of things. So one is obviously the high level risks that are described within there. So again, it's not an exhaustive list. Everyone can probably think of at least 20 more risks that will approach us for winter. But the ones that we particularly majored on as part of our overall system approach is thinking about how we make the best use of capacity. So Dean has already alluded to the fact we are a long way now from the system we used to have, whereby we would get injections of investment at this time of year that would enable us to buy surge capacity. Obviously, as part of our work through the Future Care programme, we're looking at how we make the best use of the capacity that we've got, both in and out, for that we continue to keep momentum on those things over the winter months. The risk of industrial action remains a live one. We obviously had the junior or the resident doctor action over the summer. We know that there's still a mandate for that action to continue over the winter months, and potentially with other groups coming on board. We have a well-established process for how we manage that, both within organisations and at system level, which we will keep live. Obviously, it's one of those areas until we know it's happening. We can't foretell the risk, but the system is very well rehearsed in how it brings itself together in those spaces. We've got a risk around how we share risk, ironically, which is something that I think we've tested over the last couple of winters, which is really when we get into those moments of surge, which are unavoidable during the winter months. How do we best respond and recover? This year we are testing a more dynamic risk process, so we are testing it specifically. We've already started to test it in our ambulance handover processes, and we are looking to extend it into other areas. But what we have this year is a set of kind of surge response cards, including from our local authority partners for the first time, which says what we will do when we start to hit those surge spaces, both on the day and more importantly, how we recover from them. So those will be things that we'll push on. And then our final one is obviously in the absence of having a kind of targeted winter fund, we don't have massive amounts of surge capacity in the system. So colleagues will flex within the spaces that we have, but actually it comes back to the importance of using the spaces that we've got in the most effective way. So the work through the Future Care programme is obviously looking at length of stay reduction, making sure people are in the right spaces, and we will continue to kind of actively manage that, but that remains a challenge for us going into this winter. The winter plan itself, we've tried to kind of keep in what feel like sensible kind of groupings, recognising that each one of those lines that you will read will have a set of actions and interventions underneath it that will be far more detailed and robust. You will note that quite a lot of what we're doing is building on the momentum of the work to date. So again, this is not about putting new things in for winter, but saying how do we make best use of the work that we are already doing. A lot of that is covered in the work that we're doing through the Future Care programme. There are additional elements around that are described within that plan. In addition to that, there are targeted areas of work that we can take that will improve our resilience and response. So vaccination is one of those areas. We are looking to strengthen our outbreak management response as we move into winter, and we're thinking about more creative ways that we can communicate with our public and influence behaviours in those areas. I won't go through the details of all the plan yet. I will take that as read. I guess the other bit that I would draw colleagues' eye to is what we have this year for the first time that we've not had in previous year is a much more robust set of forecasting and data intelligence tools that we will be using to help us manage winter. So through the Federated Data Platform, we have the A&E forecasting tool, which will help us look ahead and see to where some of those surges are likely to come through. And we'll be building that into our kind of daily and weekly resilience processes. We also have access now through the work that Future Care has done in terms of more robust kind of tracking of capacity in both our Pathway 1 and Pathway 2 intermediate care spaces, which will help us better forecast where our constraints are going to be and better plan our activities through our emergent transfer of care hubs. And obviously we have our system visibility dashboard, which for the first time is bringing together all the strands of pressure points that we might see to enable us to have a look and see really what is happening in our system at which points, including with our local authority partners, and hopefully enable us to take that upfront action to make that happen. The only other thing I would probably just mention to colleagues is what we are doing this year, and we've been supported through that through our the NHS regional team, is more robust testing of scenarios. So a number of system partners attended an event yesterday where we worked through a number of scenarios and applied our winter plan to those very real situations. I'm pleased to say that we felt we could respond in those spaces. There are some areas for us to strengthen, and we will continue to do that work over the coming kind of 4 to 6 weeks as before we get into the deep dark depths of the winter period. I'm probably not going to say much more than that unless Dean wants to add anything at this stage, but I'm obviously happy to take questions. Thank you.
That's very good. Thank you, Becky. Dean, is there anything you wanted to add or any questions or comments?
Please, Chair. I didn't see anything in there, and it's probably the relationship with the EPRR and business continuity more broadly. I was just thinking about how extreme weather conditions play into this plan. Maybe I missed it, but I guess it dovetails with the EPRR.
It does, because yeah, our system control centre and EPRR are run by the same team, and they have the link in with the LRF as well. So kind of our almost for the winter, our EPR arrangements and SCC are kind of one of the same thing.
Yeah, I didn't see anything that kind of said that explicitly. I suppose that's a bit from my perspective.
We can make that explicit in there. I think in previous years, actually, we have had a page that's described that. So I will ensure I'll take that back to add into that document, but it definitely exists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siobhan.
Just to say that we had our board on Monday and we signed off our assurance statement with the exception of the meeting being held yesterday.
Yes.
But yeah, doesn't mean, you know, I think we are heading into, as usual, a bit, well, I'm always worried at this time of year about winter, but probably pretty worried, especially with the financial situation across the system. I just think that dynamic risk assessment is going to be really important, and also the relationships across Dorset. Yeah. We've had nobody in the corridor at Bournemouth since we've had their new builds, which is really good, and I'd love to see that maintained through the winter. So we're continuing to focus on the flow and also obviously working sort of practices within the department and alternatives. But it is something that obviously is on all our risk registers.
Rachel.
Just a couple of observations. I mean, colleagues will know that I think it's the escalation is a critical factor, and to your point about dynamic risk assessment as part of escalation, and then what is the response and what are the parameters of that response of things you know, what are the lines for us in Dorset? What's the quality that essentially we don't until we actually sat down and worked out all the alternatives. So we've all sat on calls, haven't we, where sometimes it's the escalation processes that fall down and then it all kind of fragments. However good your written plan is just that testing about that rapid response, risk share across, and then somebody driving and following up to the points we've raised earlier about following up the actions.
Yeah. Just a quick question from me. Do we do enough, or could we do more on prevention? So as I understand it, if it's a wet winter, we get more respiratory disease and we encourage vaccination. But if it's a cold winter, we get more trips and falls and we'll get more breaks. And I sort of know what we do on vaccination, but when it's cold and we may face a surge in trips and falls, is there media we can do? Can we, you know, and do we do that?
We do respond, and Kirsty and her team respond really well to kind of things that we see coming up, because we do get some advance warning of that. We do through public health get some advance warning. We've now got the Federated Data Platform has got a prediction tool that we can use this year as well, look at the activity. So we respond to the events that we expect to be happening. So like last year there was the respiratory vaccines, RSV, kind of we responded to that. And kind of when we're expecting bad weather, there is a really good mechanism through the LRF to prepare people for that. And get
I suppose asking things like, do we text people? And we'll get a text saying don't forget to have your flu vaccine. Yeah, do you get a text saying you might not want to go out because you might fall over?
We have some of that.
Yeah, good.
Things communities can do to help people stay well. So that kind of about looking in on neighbours, making sure you know, pavements are clear, all of those things that contribute towards falls, we do with our volunteering community.
Good answer, thank you, Sam.
I would add, going upstream, it's really important we keep the messages around bone health in later life through weight bearing exercise, keeping people physically active in later midlife. That's the way that you prevent some of these future fractures. So don't miss the longer term as well.
Yeah, no, very, very good. Okay, any other questions? Okay, Patricia. Oh, sorry, thank you, Matthew.
So just a really brief point. Dean, could we, as we go through the next few months, could we bring in data here, maybe through the IPR, about what we're seeing? So we've got predictions for winter. Are we seeing what we thought we would see? Because sometimes I think we have an opportunity in this board to be a bit closer to that data. And I think, for example, if you look at the ED performance, it would be quite interesting to see levels of activity and attendance alongside the report.
We could do that. We do, because through the System Control Centre, we do a weekly kind of review of where we are now against our plan and what it was like last year as well. So they're really quite practiced at linking some of the data sets. So yeah, do that.
Okay, anyone online happy to approve? Thank you very much. So well done. We're on to item 10, the Get Dorset and BCP working plan. Is it Nicola? Yeah, hello. Come on up. Want to introduce yourselves briefly, and people ask questions, they can let you know who they are.
Okay, so today my hat, Nicola Newman, I'm representing Dorset Chamber. So Dorset Chamber was commissioned by Dorset Council to collate the Get Dorset and BCP working plan. That's a partnership plan between the two councils, DWP and the NHS.
Thanks, Nicola. Excuse me, my name's Eleanor Parson. I work for NHS Dorset in the People Directorate, and I've been working with Nicola and Rebecca on the Get Dorset BCP working plan.
Brilliant, thank you. Over to you.
So, just apologies from Rebecca. Her daughter's getting married today, so we said she can have the day off. So.
Fair enough.
So this has been a really comprehensive, if rapid piece of work. The DWP have asked for this to be published initially they'd asked for by the end of September. It will actually be sort of October time, because that's the only way it can go through both of the cabinet processes, and it's also why you don't have the full plan. So apologies for that. The full plan will be available from Monday with an action plan as well. So what we brought to you today is the progress report and an update on the direction of travel. The ambition is to keep as many people as possible in work and to get those who aren't working work. Some of that will be related to health issues, and that's the perspective that you may be more interested in here. The ambition, as I've said, is to, with no new funding, work with all the capacity that we already have across the system to be better aligned and more focused on how individual activity can end up in people being in. There's quite a strong structure around it that the DWP have asked us to follow, and some systematic change, which I think is probably where we will want to focus on in relation to your activity. So I'll just quickly call up the systematic changes that we've decided might be appropriate, and they will be visible in the plan when it's up. So we are, excuse me, you were going to talk
yeah,
about,
no worries. I suppose from a health perspective, it's been really important to be part of the development of the plan. Through the work Nicola and Rebecca have been leading on, they've actually linked with all partners in terms of its development. So all partners around the table have very much been involved through their senior leadership team meetings. We've also connected with wider partners, for example, the Department of Work and Pensions, because they're key enablers to the success of this plan as well. We've also worked really closely with DICE colleagues, and we have really robust data and insight and information now that really informs our understanding of economic inactivity and some of their health reasons for the economic inactivity in Dorset. So whilst you don't have the plan today, what we have included is some of the data from DICE that has helped inform the goals and ambitions of the plan. I think particularly for partners as well around the table, we're obviously at a key time from an NHS perspective in where we're developing our strategic commissioning framework and our strategic commissioning intentions. And I know that's going to be a discussion this afternoon. So how this informs those conversations is incredibly important. How we commission our health services and how we support people to get into work and stay in work is really critical for health and well-being of our population, as I'm sure you are aware. And then secondly, just to add, we're also having conversations around strategic workforce planning, and therefore how we inform our strategic workforce plans to ensure our widening participation intentions reflect and inform those plans, and the long-term decisions we make about our future workforce is really critical as well. So making sure that we make best use of our local population is really important to the wider health and well-being of our community. Very well. So, thank you. And the proposals around systemic changes, which would be with a 10-year vision, because the action plan that we have is a 2 to 3 year action plan and is actually a collation of mostly current activity. So in future, there's an ambition to have a single front door and shared triage for residents seeking support to enter or progress in work. Joint governance and outcomes via a pan-Dorset work and health board. Embed work into the health and care pathways. a unified employer gateway to create a simpler, more effective relationship with the system, because employers are being bombarded from all directions. Some place-based integration of services in high need areas, so we're not fragmented and siloed. We want to develop sector skills, integrated pipelines across the key sectors in the area, which are being re-identified right now, the employment sectors. And we want to use any flexible funding that does exist to enable the system to be more flexible and for the individuals' barriers potentially to be broken down. So we know that the core reason why people don't go into work is actually lack of confidence, and the reason that employers don't employ people is also lack of confidence. So if we can work on both of those, as well as all of the individual issues that people face, then that might be a change.
Really, thank you very much indeed. Questions or comments, please? Nick.
Just for information, it's going to Dorset Cabinet on the 9th of October.
Yeah, it's really, really. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Matthew Bryant, Chief Exec of Dorset Healthcare in Dorset County. Thanks for presenting this. This looks like great work, and I really welcome the approach about bringing all these resources together, creating a single front door. I think there's lots of opportunities, particularly for mental health services and access wellbeing pathways to link into that. As I'm sure you're aware, we host Dorset Work Matters, which is a partnership with Dorset Mental Health Forum and helps get people with significant mental illness into the workplace. Can I just ask, are we involved in this? Are partners involved in the conversation?
Yes, and the vocational service as well.
Great.
That runs out of Boscombe. They're very much part of the wider network that we've already established, and they've very much informed some of the work already.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. It's brilliant. And it's absolutely essential to the Dorset population. We know that, as you state, the AGM South West has some of the lowest social mobility rates in England, and that's probably reflected across where we are. So this is really important. And when you look at particularly seaside deprivation, where on the surface it appears there's full employment, when you scratch below that, a lot of it is 0 hours contracts. They're really unstable. And that leads to health inequalities and deprivation. That's not where we want to be. So, you know, we're one of the coastal navigator sites as well. So this is really, really important to raising not just the employment level, the level of household wealth that enables people to eat healthily and live healthy lives. So, yeah, really supportive of this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Forbes.
Yeah, thank you. It's really informative. I mean, the figures are stark, aren't they? Yeah. In terms of the population demographic, and you know, quite frankly, the tide that we're against in terms of trying to, you know, deliver care and health and social care. So I just wonder what the next steps are in terms of the reach of this document, and then trying to inform strategic commissioning decisions in terms of both health and local authority care, because it's, you know, it's hugely informative.
So the aim is to be cleared by both governments through October, and then it will be a published public document, and then it will be monitored on a quarterly basis in terms of some very specific measures that have been identified where we want to see change, that whether the government has specified that as well. But I think ultimately it is going to be about getting hold of it and owning it and choosing to use it, as all these plans can sometimes become something that was done because it was required rather than actually done because it was needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It becomes an active document.
Yeah, I mean, we've already, through the one in participation work, have a network established, and we've met twice now. We've got another meeting next week. So some of the conversations have already started in terms of what we can do together, which is bringing in voices from, for example, Dorset Work Matters and the vocational services as well. And we've got a clear work plan, which has the opportunity to expand wider. I do think there's a real call for action and an opportunity for us all as partners to come together, because we all have resource across the system that we're all using. And there's a real opportunity to bring that together. And alongside that comes investment to organisations as well. And there's a real opportunity to capitalise on all of that investment and bring it together. So so there is definitely something as it passes through local authorities and obviously this board about the opportunity to come together and do more.
Thank you. Other questions or comments, please? Can't see anyone online. Anyone? I was so busy. Well done. Straight up.
I guess just building on what people have said, really, we started the board meeting today, a volunteer, and I guess we're ending with a real life issue of something that's really important. And I know that the conversations we've had in between have been about meeting operational targets and our ability to be able to deliver the workforce reductions and the strategies and everything. But I guess I'm really heartened by the start and end of our conversations. They're really supportive of this. And I guess the plea, isn't there, that yes, there's financial challenges in our system, workforce and otherwise are going to play a big part. There's a lot of change in the public sector, not just in Dorset, but we're talking about Dorset and so in the public sector. So let's not that be the barriers for us doing the right thing for our people, our communities, because this is key to kind of our neighbourhood health going forward and sustainability. So I'm really excited about it. As Ellie said, there's already a wider participation plan in place, and it is about getting action behind it. There's a lot of action always happening in organisations, but is the action always the right action? And I think what this plan does, and the wider participation plan, is helps us navigate doing the right things together. So really supportive of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? If we manage to have a front door and more people get access to talk about these things, what are some of the pinch points that might throw up? In other words, will a lot of people say, I need help with my CVs, or a lot of people say, I need help with my mobile? What if we're down the line in a little while and we've built access through neighbourhoods? I guess I'm asking, do you have a sense of what some of the pinch points might be?
I think some of it is going to be covered off by Connect to Work. So we didn't talk about that specifically, but that is the funded programme, which is going to help some people with very specific problems. I think, I'm just talking from my experience in a prior life, that getting people into work is a very individual process, and their specific barriers are never the same as somebody else's. So when we were working, I used to be Chief Exec of Ansby Guidance, and we had a big project working with Meet Young People. And hard to reach young people, and it was always that they had individual barriers that if you chipped away at, as in that chipping away process, you could build their confidence and they get into educational or work. But that's in upfront high investment, but long term very good investment. So it is that continual argument to have the upfront one-to-one support. 3 months, 12 weeks was the maximum. We had a normal curve. In 12 weeks we could get people into educational training. And then after that, there may be harder things to overcome. But yeah, so it's sort of short-term, high impact investment, long-term gain.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to add to that?
Probably only picking from the point that Nicola raised in terms of the individual nature of what's probably needed is probably a big pinch point. Some of the services that Matthew's already described. Part of the challenge is that one-to-one support that they need, which varies, and sometimes somebody just needs one conversation, but sometimes somebody needs something for 12 months. So it's probably trying to develop a front door that responds to every individual need, and that's probably going to be a big pinch point. It's also the employers, I have to say, because we need to educate employers to take higher risk. So what they perceive as high risk, because actually it often turns out to be lower risk, because if you take a higher risk up front, those people will stay for longer. So this whole piece that we continually through the chamber are educating employers about, but right now their confidence levels are also quite low.
Yeah, it's for big organisations and the local authorities and the trust. There's this difficulty of how do you embed a new way of thinking deep into the organisation so that the institution itself starts to think in that way. Years ago, I was Chief Executive of London Borough, and we introduced a programme of persistent young offenders being sentenced to an apprenticeship in our building works department. And that was their community sentence. And 50 people got sentenced to an economic future and didn't reoffend. 5 years later, the scheme didn't exist because everybody that had agreed it in the court service and the probation service and the local authority had moved on. And so I think one of the challenges for us to think about with prevention is how we embed a different way of thinking and working in deep into middle management and the organisation, so that good initiatives sustain. If that makes sense.
Some feedback
Yeah.
from a meeting I was at earlier this week with Dorset Council, that the sort of feedback there was that they should intend to, as a council, do everything they could internally to impact the goals in this, and then look at all the commissioning partnering they were doing to impact the goals of this. So very much looking at what they could do, as you've just mentioned. So and the public sector employs more people than anyone in Dorset. They're their biggest employer.
Yeah, no, thank you. Really interesting discussion. Anyone else? Yes.
I think it's also the balance, Nicola, that we've personally both had in past run lives, is that it's not always about the big boys. And it's like, and coming back to the mental health issues and that sort of thing, there's got to be horses for courses. And that basically it's educating the smaller organisations, because then people feel part of a family. And it's just, but also the mini startup businesses and one-man bands and that sort of thing, which, you know, again, all that funding's gone through Europe, but actually there was some really good modelling done years ago with that.
Is there anything you want us to do that we're not doing?
Hey.
Hey.
I was just going to say this is going to be made even more difficult. Attendance. Because that 20% of students who are meeting the attendance criteria and then missing out on all these things that will also their ability to get themselves into employment. That's something I'm sure the local authorities are very aware of. That's something which sort of narrows that gap in terms of the support they need for whatever their next step would be. Helpful.
We've actually got a focus next week at the widening participation coming to that. So,
is there anything you want us to do that we're not doing?
Well, it'd be great if every time you do something, you think, how will this help somebody stay or get into work? That would be perfect.
Sam's trying to make us more task focused. All right, thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We didn't have any, sorry, we've got the items for consent. There are no items. We didn't have any questions given in advance from the public. I know Mr. Sylvester is here, and Mr. Sylvester, you may have some concerns about your own recent case. I think probably better if you speak to you about that offline. I'm conscious it's a public meeting, but if you want to let us know what's happened.
That's a systemic problem.
Yeah, no, sure. If we'd had a question in advance, I would have had time on the agenda to take it.
It's an opportunity to share with you current experience.
I understand that. I'm happy to give you 5 minutes, but sometimes, I say this nicely, 5 minutes can turn into half an hour. So if you think you can let us know succinctly in 5 minutes, I'll sort of break the normal rules and give you the opportunity to say so, but I will keep you to 5 minutes if that's all right, sir.
I'm happy to do that. Unaccustomed as I am, I want to share with you current experience from a patient. You need a little bit of background because I have a number of comorbidities. I will tell you that I am over 25 in case it escaped you. And the one that is particularly relevant is, and I should say I am with the Adam practice in Hamworthy. 8.5 years ago, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I was very fortunate to get on an international trial at that time, which was about androgen therapy and radiotherapy. That is important background to the problem today. So yesterday, I was shopping in Waitrose. Gentlemen of my age group needed to go to the loo. And where typically, from my experience as a patient, blood in the urine is evidenced either by a dip test or in the laboratory, this was very, very obvious, extremely so. But I am an expert patient in the context of my own presentation of this disease. So I've been with it for 8.5 years. I have a good understanding of presentations, and I have been through numerous different exploratory situations in and out of hospital. My immediate reaction was A&E. Then I thought, actually, it is so sudden and so unusual. I've never experienced this before, but I have had DIP tests and others that have evidenced it, UTIs, all those sort of things that one might experience. So I decided against an immediate reaction, because our practice has a very good system, had a very good system. It was called the clinic system, and a patient could log on, give full details of the presentation, which was then passed through to triage so that they could decide on the immediately appropriate reaction. When I logged on to clinic, I was told that that has now ceased, and I was directed to another online service. So I followed the route, and I was presented with a menu. The first item on the menu was a new presentation. So I clicked on that, and the system said, we cannot help you with that. So I went back through the system and looked for another presentation, and it said an existing condition. Well, I thought after 8.5 years, I can claim an existing condition. So I pressed the button for that. It came back and said, we can't help you with that. The clinic system had always been responsive.
What time of day was that, Mr. Sylvester? What time were you trying to?
I'm talking early evening.
Yeah, because I think when the surgeries are closed.
If you let me finish,
sorry, yeah.
I can give you all the detail. I am a detail man. So I looked at the presentation again, because obviously frequency of urination is a symptom of my condition. And the acuteness of the presentation diminished during the evening. I decided to sleep on it and to go to the practice this morning. So I was there at 7:45. And they have an access to the system, and they've taken all the details. The problem is that I think the chair was about to talk to, is that the system closes down at 4 PM and doesn't start again till 7:45 in the morning. Now, you may want to dismiss a single experience as statistically irrelevant. If you think that, you shouldn't be at this table. This is reality. This is what a patient experiences. And I learned very on that perception is the reality. And I can tell you there is a very broad perception in Dorset, and of course throughout the country, as we see. The perception is the system is not working. And we seem to be throwing out the good in favour of future good, but currently incompetent. It is unbelievable to me, that situation. Now, I will be leaving here either to go back to my practice to be seen by a medic, or I will be going to A&E. That's the only option I have. Now, I'm a reasonably intelligent member of the public. What proportion of the public being rejected by the online system would know what to do?
Yeah. It's been raised before, Mr. Sylvester, and you make a very good comment. And I think what's happened is that for many surgeries, clinic used to be available out of hours, so that you could log on to the system and it would accept something.
And
but now it
came in the morning, they'd have a
way. I guess that's the surgery trying to manage its caseload, but it means that the system is available when the surgery is open, rather than having extended hours.
The only way you can manage a caseload is to know what the caseload is.
Yeah.
You can't shut them out.
Yeah.
You don't close the gatekeeping door.
No, well, look, thank you for the feedback. And I think all we can say to you today is that it's something we're happy to look at and to talk to.
I think it needs urgent
I don't know
attention.
if
It is
Patricia
about
or
perceptions.
Forbes or anybody wants to comment, but it's probably something we should be aware of in terms of access to online services outside of normal business hours. Is it something that we think we ought to?
I was trying to be responsible and not go.
Yeah,
to
no,
A&E,
thank you.
because I do not want to sit in A&E for 4,
Yeah, no,
5,
thank you.
however many hours.
I think we understand the point you're making. I don't know, Forbes or Patricia, if you wanted to say that. I think we should say to Mr. Sylvester it's something we ought to look at.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the immediate response. We'll have a look at it and try and understand better the detail. What I'm slightly unclear about is, was there not an opportunity for someone with a more urgent concern to contact the practice directly outside of that
That's
mechanism?
the only mechanism at the moment, as I understand it.
And I suggest, had you wanted attention yesterday, that's what the practice would have had.
No, you're directed
Offered
to
you.
111.
Yeah.
Yeah, direct.
So
All right, well, look, thank
that's
you.
all I can say, but without investigating, you know.
First of all, as Chair, thank you
Very
for.
interested to hear your comments.
And thank you.
Thank you for taking 5 minutes. I really appreciate the comments, and we will look at that, Mr. Sylvester. Thank you. Any other business? Anyone, please? Key messages from today's meeting. I won't re-rehearse everything that we've gone through today, but interesting discussion based on the patient story around the community and the voluntary sector, and how do we think about that as we become a strategic commissioner. We had updates from Patricia and myself, and so I hope you feel up to date on the cluster. And I thought the discussion on vaccination was interesting, for example, segueing into our own staff and using behavioural science to think about how do we encourage more of our staff to be vaccinated. On the bat, that we sort of agree where we are. So thank you very much. And on the committee reports, we had those discussions on a couple of areas, for example, on digital and on cyber and on digital strategy, which we agreed we'll take forward. Thank you for the performance report, and we noted the areas that you're watching, as it were, and discussing with everybody. And Rachel, you'll discuss with Dean offline the areas where there was some issues on the data. Repeat my well done to Liz and the corporate governance team, and we had a good discussion on the winter plan, and quite good to hear how flexible we can be on different surges with different comms. I mean, I thought that was good answers to the questions that you had, and the very interesting discussion there on getting people into work. And I think as we get place-based arrangements in place in each of the local authorities, thinking about how everybody works together around the strategy of getting people into work in those places becomes all the more important. And we heard Mr. Sylvester's comments at the end, and we'll look at online access outside of office hours. Is there anything else from the meeting that you wanted to capture, or if there's anything that I should have put at the high level summary that I didn't? Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of the part 1 meeting. If